think we're ready. Is everyone ready? Okay. We want to welcome you out to the Highland City Council meeting today, which is October the 1st, 2024. We'll begin our meeting with an invocation by Councilmember Brittany Beals, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, which I will lead.
Our dear Father in heaven, we're so grateful tonight for the ability we have to gather together in this beautiful place that we live in. Pray that as we go throughout our night, we will be able to have open hearts and open minds to the things that we will discuss. We're so very grateful for our first responders and for everything that they do for us, and pray that thy Spirit will be with them to protect them in everything that they do. We recognize and understand all of the uncertainty in the world and pray for peace and comfort for those who are affected, and pray that as we go throughout this evening, we will be able to have kindness and compassion for each other. And this we ask for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Please stand with me as we do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we have set apart a time for scheduled unpublic appearances. If there's anyone that'd like to come up and address the council, if they'll please just state their name and keep their comments to 3 minutes. We'll now come to unscheduled public appearances.
I'm Elizabeth Rice, a citizen of Highland, and I've kind of been looking at the chart that you're going to approve tonight, and how hard, Rob and the front office have worked on it. Now, I appreciate that. And then I talked to Rob, and he said, well, this part really isn't on the chart. It's more in the developmental code, so I'm going to ask you to consider something. So I believe that when any developer keeps coming back, I don't think it should just be seen, and I don't mean to say just, I think it needs to come back to the city council. And honestly, I hope you charge them for every time they come, because the front office is busy and they need, I think that helps pay for some of their, for their pay. But the way I looked at it, I thought that it would just keep coming back to the Planning Commission. So when we have a developer that keeps coming back and changing things, and I call it the bait and switch program, I just think that needs to be seen by the city council. Especially if we're dumbing down, we're going to a less expensive facade, or we're doing something that's not what the original plan said. So I wrote this down and I'm going to read it. I think it is only fair that the people of Highland get to see the difference between what Highland was promised with Highland Mains and with what the developer is now doing and what it will finally look like. My understanding, and I will stand corrected if I'm wrong, it is different. And I would very much like to see the difference. Thanks for your time. That's it.
Thank you, Liz. Is there anyone else who'd like to come address the council?
Hello, my name is Corey Fries. I've been in Highland for 18 years, and I'm here today. I've been working with Highland City's team on a public property issue. Obviously, this is not the time and place to go into detail, but just to introduce myself, that I talking to Aaron Wells, mainly in the city, about requesting might be an exception, a change the development code, or a one-off, whatever is the right solution to achieve what I want to achieve. But in short, I live in the Ridgeview development, and my property backs up to the Highland Glen Park and Ride lot. And long story short, I'm trying to get permission to have a gate between my fence and the public parking lot. I think there's kind of a precedent set throughout the city. If you go anywhere you drive around, you'll see side of lots, backs of lots, gates, not just man gates, but vehicle gates. And there's more to explain. But I just want to introduce myself. If I'm talking to Erin, she suggests I need to reach out to the city council members individually to get some support to bring it to an agenda item to where I can go through it in more depth and explain myself, and obviously you can check with Aaron in the city what background is and other precedents or what have you. But just want to introduce myself, so when I reach out, a face and a name, and then hopefully you'll give me a few minutes of your time, and then you can ask me a bunch of questions and ask Aaron and team a bunch of questions. What's best for hopefully both me and for Highland City. So thank you.
Thank you, Corey. And then Aaron's let you be aware how to communicate to the council. You go to our website, you'll have the information of each council member, how to communicate to them. So,
Yes, thank you. I have.
anyone else like to come up and address the council? Okay, seeing none at this time, we'll close our unscheduled public appearance time. We'll come on to our first item. We have a presentation. Chief Williams, I know, would love to be here, but we have a good replacement here in Officer Brooks. So we'd like to now turn some time to Officer Brooks to bring up about an event I think most of us are aware that happened here in August here in Highland, about where we had some pretty good heroes that stepped forward in our community. So Officer Brooks. Okay. If that's okay with the council, but Landon was the resident that kind of helped step in, and so I think it'd be appropriate for us to, when Landon gets here, to maybe do that. So we'll go on now to, is everyone okay if we?
Yes. Mayor, are they bringing the horse?
They're bringing the horse. Oh, he's, okay. Okay. Okay, we will now move our item number 2A to a later time inside our council meeting and go to item number 2B, which is Timpanogos Special Service District. We have this down as Aaron Wells, but I think we have our representative here, Brian Braithwaite. Aaron, are we going to have anything presented by that, or is Brian going to come present?
Brian's got it all.
Okay. Mr. Braithwaite.
A little nervous now. Thank you for inviting me to come. I feel a privilege to represent the city of Highland on the Poop Plant Board. For those of you affectionately know, the TSSD, Timpanogos Special Service District. At least that's what my kids always call it. So I've tried to provide something really simple and straightforward. The question that Aaron proposed to me is there's some fee changes and other financial issues, and just wanted me to talk about it. So I'm going to throw some things out, and if I don't cover the questions that you have, then I'm here to answer the questions. So if you look at this sheet, this is specific to giving you a feel of why specifically the impact fee is being increased. One of the important things that we feel like impact fees are for is to make sure that we have everyone paying their fair share of the costs. When you create an infrastructure, there are people who are physically not here who will be coming, and so we want to make sure that they pay their fair share because we're having to build the infrastructure. We have a lot of people moving to this end of Utah County, and this is a way for them to pay their fair share of the infrastructure that's put into the ground today when they come. So impact fees are supposed to do that. All of the costs involved in this are not carried by new people. We carry a certain cost because if you have a pipe that's this big and you increase it, they only pay for the increase because they're coming in. So we pay for the new pipe that we were originally using, and they pay the difference between that size and the next size. So that's what we're talking about is an impact fee, is that difference, not covering the whole infrastructure of all the changes.
Even though you wouldn't have to replace that pipe if it weren't increased in size.
The law, that is true, but the law says that you have to pay for your piece. So you get a benefit, or we get a benefit, because if we put a new pipe in, it will last an extended period of time.
Okay, got it. It's going to be capital.
Yes.
So, okay.
And these are only capital costs.
Yeah.
So the maintenance fees are when they finally get here.
That changes it dramatically. Thank you.
Okay. So I try to make something really brief on the piece of paper that I gave out to you. On the one side, it shows you all the details. I figured if you really want to get into it, you can get into the details of it. On the other side, I just tried to simplify it. There's 3 areas that are being impacted. The reason why this has increased is if you look below, in 2022, we created, we defined what the costs were going to be In 2023, we came back and did a new impact fee study, an analysis, and found that there was a lot of inflation and other costs. If we don't change the impact fee, all of those additional costs when we actually have to spend are lost. So we did a new analysis and approved a new impact fee. If you notice, you can see what the impact fee was in 2022, what it was in 2023, the increase, and you can see what it is right now that we are proposing for 2020. We are proposing that will start in 2025. So it's the 2023 increase, 2024 increase, and what 2025 increase will be. All the amount that's there is based upon, or most of the amount is based upon inflation. You can see the difference in the dollar amount. In 2023, the cost was $993 million. It went up to almost 1.2 million. You can see the difference. That is the impact fee. That's what it's based upon. So just so it's really simple and clear, that's why we're increasing it. We now have a better feel. We've gone out, these are bids that we went out, and these are bids that we're accepting. And we knew,
Is it 1.2 billion?
1.2 billion.
That's with a B. We want to make sure we're hearing the B.
Yes, 1.193 billion.
Hey, Brian, can you just tell us then how does that impact Highland City residents individually? What will they be seeing on their?
They will see nothing on this
Okay, this
unless
is just impact.
they buy a home.
Another question though is, so this is based off of inflation. So what are we looking at? Will this
This is
be
this
raised
is, no,
within
no,
the
this is
next-
based upon actual bids that have gone out. So the inflation
Yeah.
is already in that amount. It's not guessing what it is in the future. This is based upon real bids that we can show you and say, this is the cost.
Okay.
And we're going out and actually, this week, we started bonding. In fact, today, good and bad news. The good news for our bond is that you've got the strike that's going on, which is shutting down the Eastport. We have the wars that are going on and other things like that that have people go to bonds, and it lowers the interest rate because more people are wanting to buy them. So our interest rate that we went in was 4.1. We ended up with 3.9 for what we did today. So sometimes things, bad news is good news. This was one of those times. And 2 percentage points is a big deal when you're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars.
So does that number take into account then that reduction in their bond?
As we move forward, so we have other bonds that are going to be coming.
Mhm.
We don't know exactly what those are going to be. It will be reflected if we get all of our bonds at a lower rate than what we anticipated. But what we don't know is what the next one, it could be a little bit higher and the balance between the two is adjusted.
So if it's not then?
Oh no. Oh no. We have a lot more, but we don't want to go out and bond for stuff that we don't need to spend money on. This is a cash flow issue. So we're just trying to bond enough that we have enough cash to get through the projects that we have, and then we're going out again for more bonding, only to make sure that we keep our cash at the right place. Bonding too early just means we're wasting money on interest that we wouldn't use. So the second thing, just real quick, we talked about, when I was here in February, we talked about the rate increase that happened for 2024. We will have another rate increase in 2025. We talked about it, that it was a 40% that we would do. We hadn't done one since 2009. We did one at 40%. We will be doing another one. We anticipate, as I stated here in February, that it'll probably be 15%. That's what we're still planning on, and we will expect that to happen. So you should be planning on that. We anticipate also doing it again in 2026, that we would do the same thing. And we're projecting that out to you so that you can prepare your budgets and be thinking about that.
Did I hear you correctly? 15% increase starting in January for the
15%
TSSE rate.
increase in January, yes.
So you're on a
It
calendar
is-
year, not a fiscal year.
Correct.
Wait,
We're
so
on
what is the
fiscal.
basis? What is the basis behind that 15% rate next year, and then the second subsequent 15%?
As we're projecting all the cash flow is based upon when the projects start and when we need the money. So we have a lot of projects starting now, we have more projects starting in the future. This is to make sure that our cash flow meets the requirements when you do bonding, that the underwriters are happy with where our cash flow is and all the other financial pieces that are tied into that. So this is meeting those requirements, those minimum expectations for what they have.
So I just want to get this correct. Impact fees increasing, 40% increase, next 15%, and then 15% after that.
Yes,
That's a lot of increasing.
it is. And it's why we're talking about $1 billion plant that has to be paid for. And if we didn't have to build it, we wouldn't have to face this. This is not something like you can say, we're not going to build it, therefore they won't come. We are looking at all the numbers, and we are building it based upon what the projections are. And you can't turn it on. It takes about 10 years to build a facility, to go through all the regulatory problems and issues that you have to face, as well as the infrastructure. It's a huge undertaking. And so you have to be ahead of that curve, or when you push that little button to flush your toilet, it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays there, and that's a bad thing for most people.
I'm just thinking, so has there been any other like funding opportunities that you've looked for outside of increases in this area, like grants?
We do. We have grant.
Okay.
We have $74 million grant that's coming from the federal government,
You did get
which
one?
requires us to do some of these projects start them before December 31st of this year.
Oh, gotcha. What grant was it? IAJ or ARPA?
I don't remember.
Probably IAJ. Okay.
Should have thought about that before and been ready
Sorry.
for it.
Brian,
I can send it to you.
Okay.
You-
Yeah,
you-
send that to me.
what you've been mentioning, so you're building a new plant. If we had not had the growth in the area, could we have worked with the existing plant? Because this is where I think the question comes for impact is what Ron was talking about is, when you say, hey, if we don't build it, they it's not that they wouldn't come. Is this an infrastructure that we need because it's been aging, or is this because we do have the new building, or is it all of it?
It's all of it. It's mostly new. And so because we're having to do new, we decided to do a new process. And that new process is less expensive than the current process. So that long-term, it will be a less expensive user cost for all of us. But it's because we had to double in size.
So, and then the area that the TSSD services, Timpanogos Special Service District, I think it takes in what the ranches, American Fork, Saratoga. Does it take Lehigh and all that? I mean, is that the area that's all part of this district?
Yeah, it's all of northern Utah. So it's Saratoga Springs. It is most of Eagle Mountain. So everything on this side of the mountain, everything on that side, they do their own processing.
The city center.
All of Lehigh, some of Draper, Highland, Alpine, Cedar Hills. It is Pleasant Grove, American Fork, and Vineyard. Most of Vineyard, 98% of Vineyard.
Hey, Brian, what's the anticipated completion date of this?
2032.
That was the very question I was going to ask. Good job, Kim.
Most of it'll be done in 2030. We started this in 2020, but there are a few things that are outlined to that. We're also making modifications as we learn new things. We've added some additional costs, so that 200 and almost $250 million that's been added, not all of that is increased because of inflation. Some of it is redesign to be able to do things more efficiently. We're getting new mandates by the federal government to do certain things, and so we've had to add those processes in. It's easier to add them in now as we're building than it is to bolt them on later. They just don't work as well.
Is there a time frame that goes along with that $74 million federal grant that you get? Is there you have to have a completion date with that as well?
Yes, but we'll easily meet that.
Okay.
The harder part is getting it to make sure that we get it started.
Any other questions?
Will you be ready for Super Bowl Sunday?
We are always ready for Super Bowl Sunday. You remember that discussion?
We do.
Yeah.
We know the busiest time for our sewer plant is halftime on Super Bowl Sunday.
It absolutely is.
But I think Scott had some questions.
Yes.
Yeah, well, this is just a little tangent. So I understand, I sit on the board for the North Point Transfer Station, and we just sold a piece of property that was underwater to the county because they want to extend the trail. And I understand they have permission to have the trail around the lake behind you folks.
Yes.
Is still in plan?
Yes. In fact, we've been working on that. So what he's talking about is each time you expand, to expand the plant that we have, we're moving into a wetland area. And to be able to do that, you have to find equivalent wetland that you create. So it's a net zero. And so we're pushing closer to the lake, but there's some lake area further away. We also have some lake property, such as this, that we are able to bring in from the county that will help offset all of that. And there is a trail that's going to go at the bottom or next to the lake that will allow you to walk from Linden Harbor all the way around to the American Fork Harbor. It will probably go all the way into Saratoga Springs at some point in time. The county wants to continue that trail. So there's always these little things. That's why it takes 10 years to do something big like this. A lot of negotiation, a lot of rules, a lot of T's to cross and I's to dot. Good questions.
Question for you, Brian.
Yes.
So the capital improvement plan, does it even contemplate, I know we're still working with the state to look at potential water reuse.
Yes.
Does it even contemplate the facilities that was needed for that? Because we don't really have that go-ahead yet, correct?
We won't pay for those facilities.
Okay.
So those will be the cities that actually pay for it because they'll benefit from it. So we contemplate the land and the layout and everything like that. But if it doesn't work out, we haven't put any costs other than some initial design kinds of things. But American Fork and Lehigh are the two cities that would benefit. And so should this go through, they will pay that infrastructure cost.
And that reuse is secondary water?
Yes. Yes, and it's the water, the rights that we have talked about as a city council, it's that water that would be used. So it flows down there. They have to build an infrastructure to pump it back up into their city in the locations that they would want to. So they have to, so the cost and the value of our water is conditional upon the cost it would take to pump it up and all of those kinds of things. And that's where we don't know exactly what it's going to be yet. Still working through that.
So we're actually hoping next time, council, is to have a 6 o'clock work session with you on October 15th to talk about our sewer rates. We were only thinking about last year's increase, and then I heard that another one was coming. Well, I should say I was reminded, because you're right, Brian had warned us back in February, and so we'll see if we can get that put into the model before the 15th, ultimately to have that conversation. But we'd appreciate any details you have beyond the 15% if you have an actual dollar amount or anything. That'd be helpful to us, Brian.
Yeah, we haven't passed that yet, and so
I don't know if your finance team has anything they could send us,
but we should. Well, we've talked about what the numbers are internally, but it's not public.
Okay.
I'm comfortable to say it's around 15% because it'll be around that.
But it's going to go into effect January 1st?
January 1st.
That was one of our issues last year, is it went in January. We didn't have a part of our budget and fee schedule.
So our intention is to present it to you as the draft on October 15th. If we can get this 15% added in there and then have you contemplate adoption in the November City Council meeting.
So Brian, what happens if we don't pass the increase? I guess you guys just keep building the city and we eat it?
Yeah. The contract between Timpanogos Sewer is that we are all cities, we're all part of it. When the board approves it, then it is passed on, and what you do with it is up to you.
Hey, Brian, do you have a digital copy of this?
I do.
Can you send that to me because I'm old and I can't read it?
That's why I did the other side, is just in case, because those are the important, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't read it.
Yeah, it's a PDF.
Ron, give me your glasses.
You can't even read the side that I did?
Oh, man. I don't
I'm
know.
one of the oldest ones and I can read it.
Can you read that?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
could read
I
I have trifocals too, so.
Kim, I also can't read it.
Kim,
What?
it's a PDF. I can send it to you.
Hey, with that federal grant also, just FYI, the state is urging all like entities to just make sure that your funds are obligated by the end of the year just because of political clawbacks. Just saying that.
What you just said, sometimes when there's a political change, things get changed.
So one other thing, we are also in the process and are very close to having us detached from the county to become our own entity. It's gone way longer than what we thought. We were hoping in January, but we're really close to that. And we will change the name. We haven't finalized on what it is, but
Can we vote on the name?
you can always vote.
Okay.
You can vote on anything you want. Doesn't mean anything
I
will
don't think
happen
they're
from that.
called for it.
And don't
different word in there I was thinking of.
don't embarrass me by making me take it back and having us talk about it at the meeting either. So
Okay, well, thank you.
That it?
I think so.
wow, that was easy. Thanks.
We'll be squirming when their increase comes, so. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I would, if there is no objection, I would like to move item 5B onto the consent agenda.
How about before we do that, we actually now go, I noticed that Landon just walked
perfect.
in.
Yep.
So why don't we go back to item number 2A so we don't have to keep all these individuals here?
But I support Doug on that
Okay,
move
so
too.
we'll move, what you're saying is move item 5B up to consent. Right. Okay. If everyone's okay, well, when it comes time, we'll move that up. But we'll now turn the time over to Officer Brooks for presentation and award.
Thank you, council members, city officials, and all community members that are present here tonight. I'm Lieutenant Brooks with the Lone Peak Police Department. I'm here on behalf of Chief Brian Gwilliam. He offers his sincerest apologies that he couldn't be here. He's grown ill, and he would be here if he could be. I know he's here in spirit, and more importantly, you too. So, we appreciate each of you for your understanding and the importance of being present to recognize the heroic first responders and citizens within our communities. On August 8th, 2024, at approximately midnight, Officer Williams was off duty and on his way home when he witnessed a vehicle traveling westbound on Canal Boulevard at a high rate of speed. Officer Williams initiated his radar unit and obtained a confirmed speed on the vehicle of 65 miles per hour on that roadway. Officer Williams turned around to effect a traffic stop on the vehicle. The vehicle continued west on Canal Boulevard at a high rate of speed. As Officer Williams came around the bend, just west of Alpine Highway, he saw the vehicle went off the roadway, struck a tree, and had burst into flames. Officer Williams immediately gave his location and called for additional units and fire to respond. Officer Williams attempted to free the teenage driver from his vehicle, but found he was pinned in the side of the vehicle and he couldn't get him out. The flames and heat became so intense that Officer Williams was only able to continue his efforts for short stints at a time. Officer Kinsler from the Lone Peak Police Department then arrived with other officers from the American Fork Police Department and a concerned citizen, Landon Waldvogel. The officers worked together to work on getting the teen driver out of the vehicle. At this time, Landon saw a roll that needed to be filled, and he did just that. He filled it. Landon began carrying buckets of water from a home that was approximately 70 yards away and began throwing the water on the burning vehicle in an attempt to douse the flames. Landon did this several times until the driver was extricated from the vehicle by officers after they had attached a tow rope to the vehicle's mangled door and pulled on it together until it was forced open. Officer Kinsler pulled the driver to a safe distance where Landon continued to provide water to cool the driver until he would later receive medical treatment by the Lone Peak Fire Department. Having been a firefighter and EMT for over 12 years before coming to the dark side, as many of my old fire friends would put it, I know that patient care on burn victims is always difficult and very challenging. The pre-hospital care on these types of injuries is critical in determining the patient's later success in healing and their ultimate recovery. So I'd like to offer a thank you to the Lone Peak Fire Department on a job well done. I've got a couple videos here we'd like to show. The first one is the dash camera, Officer Williams' dash camera. I'll kind of give you a broad view of everything that had taken place. Then after that, we'll watch a body camera that was attached to an American Fork police officer where you get a little bit closer. The second video, we're going to have the audio shut off on it. I think it would be inappropriate to have it on. So. For this first video, there will be about a 30-second delay before you hear any audio That's just the way the cameras and things are set up. Once they initiate their lights, they automatically bounce back 30 seconds and start recording.
Correction, 18J15. I got a 1050 vehicle on fire, Canal Boulevard, just east of Alpine Highway. Send medical.
Yeah, we'll start the second one. The second video, it's body camera, so it's up close from one of the American Fork officers. The first one you saw pull up there, that ultimately pulled the tow rope and got it to their officers to get the door open. Very telling story. Between the officers who were there, and I don't know if you could catch, Landon in the background several times as he was biggest buckets of water he could carry, getting water put on that car. And then even when in the body camera, you can see him pass right by the officer a few times. So, Landon, could you come on up, please? The noun heroism comes from Greek heros, which refers to someone who shows great courage and valor. Their actions are considered to be acts of heroism. In modern culture, a hero is often seen as someone who is admired for courage, selflessness, and noble qualities, and who is willing to take risks or make sacrifices in order to help others or achieve a noble goal. This, to me, in our department, without question, describes Landon Waldvogel. His character and his outlook towards life. We are truly blessed to have you as a member of our community here in Highland, Landon. As you saw in the dash camera video, the first one, the second the driver was removed from the vehicle, the car became fully engulfed in flames. There's no question in my mind that the efforts and actions taken by Landon bought officers the crucial seconds they needed to get the driver removed from that vehicle. These seconds, without question, saved the life of this young man. As first responders, recognition is given to those who go above and beyond, who focus, dedicate, and sacrifice in the name of their communities. Those recognitions come in the form of commendations and or citations reflecting a specific act that accomplished an important goal or conclusion. Landon, I'm here today to present you with the Lone Pig Police Department Chief's citation. This citation is being awarded to you for the heroic actions and courageous response on the night of August 8th, 2024. It notes on there that in honor of your extraordinary bravery and selfless actions, which have made a significant impact on the safety and well-being of our community, your courageous response exemplifies the spirit of heroism and dedication that contributes to a stronger, safer society. Your actions are deeply appreciated and serve as an inspiration to all others within our Highland community. We're very proud.
I'd like to invite Officer Williams to come up and Officer Keisner, please come on up. Tonight, the City of Highland would like to recognize those who are Highland heroes. This award is not given out very often. It's those who do something extraordinary for someone else in the community or that has went beyond. And I think as we've seen from the video, we have some great officers here that went beyond to be able to recognize and save someone's life, as well as our neighboring officers down in American Fork. We appreciate American Fork officers for them coming into mutual aid to help us in the city. We recognize also Landon, and I'm not going to try to say the last name, but as a hero in the community to jump out and to come out at midnight, to be able to help someone that's in need and to help our officers, they're there. So tonight, I'd like to recognize Officer Williams, Officer Keisner, and Landon as heroes of Highland, and I've got an award for that. Thank you once again, Officer. If it's okay, the council, if we could all kind of get. Probably some of you watched the video also knows there are some officers that had fire extinguishers and not. We have also talked about that to get that rectified. We'll now move on to our consent item, which we have now item 5B that has been moved up, which is our annual fertilizer order. We'll now move up to consent. Is there a motion on that item?
I move to adopt the consent item 5B.
I'll second it.
Motion by Doug, second by Scott. If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and go to vote on that.
We'll need a roll call on this one, Mayor.
Okay, we'll start down here with
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
and Ron.
Yes.
Okay, that expedited item 5B is now approved. It's 5-0. We'll now move on to our first action item, which is a public hearing and ordinance, which is the text amendment and land use table, which is part of our development code update. That will be Rob Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I had to step out quickly because every other item on this agenda is mine now that you've moved Jeff's up to consent. This first item is something that we've been working on for a little bit and it has been discussed with Council a little while ago, is consolidating all of the various entities and reviewing bodies and approving bodies and appeal bodies throughout our code, our development code, into a single table for ease of reference, use, and any changes or updates desired in the future. I'm starting kind of with the Planning Commission because they had some stipulations, and I'll walk through because I've added those into the proposed amendments. The Planning Commission heard this last week, held a public hearing on the 24th. We had 3 residents speak, one of which who is here tonight. The other 2 are also here tonight, but up on the dais. And the suggestions from those residents were incorporated or adopted by the commission as part of the recommendation of approval. They voted 7-0 to recommend approval of this amendment with 4 changes. One was to add language, explain the difference between legislative and administrative approvals. That has been added in as kind of before the table. You have to read what a legislative act is, what an administrative act is. Help the table readability, meaning you kind of read it left to right in terms of a process. And it helps to explain where there is no recommending body on some items. Make a note. I added a note explaining, not every application needs a recommending body or a formal recommendation. There was an additional specification that the subdivision approval process in there and the approving bodies for that are for administrative subdivisions, ones that already conform to existing zoning and are not looking for rezones or anything special. So I've added a note that those are for existing or subdivisions under existing zoning, that any exceptions have to come to the council for legislative approval, and then add a little explanation of the difference between a minor and a major subdivision as the Planning Commission requested. So, getting more into the details of this amendment, it creates a land use authority table that identifies who reviews, recommends, approves, and hears appeals of land use matters, both administrative, meaning those that you have to approve as long as they meet all code requirements, and legislative, where you don't have to approve it. It depends on policy considerations, general plan, things like rezones, and general plan amendments. Those come to council, but those are listed in the table as well. It adds a few new definitions. It clarifies who our DRC is, our Development Review Committee, as staff. And we review all things, but we give only informal recommendations as it kind of moves on to final approvals. I've defined what a reviewing body, a recommending body, a land use authority, and appeal authority is, so we use those terms throughout the code, and defined administrative versus legislative actions. I've also tried to correlate the various approval processes throughout all zones. This did result in a few substantive changes that I do want to highlight for the council to consider. The non-substantive changes is I removed a lot of extraneous approvals. A lot of the site plans had like little subsets of approvals where it said like the city engineer will approve the grading plan, where that's not actually true. What it does is the engineer reviews the grading plan that's submitted, but ultimately it goes to the council or to the planning commission for review for actual approval. Or there's things saying, the zoning administrator will make a recommendation. Well, of course we will. We don't need to specify that separately. So I took out all that extraneous language. I have proposed using the same approving bodies for each type of application. So a site plan will be reviewed, recommended, and approved by the same person or same body or entity, no matter which zone it is. Before it was a little bit inconsistent. Same with site plan amendments. We require a site plan approval process, and clarifying that sensitive lands appeals are appealed with the land use application. There's not a separate appeal process for that. So here are the changes that I have made to the code. Everything else has mostly just been changing terminology. These are actual changes to how things are processed. In the CR zone, architecture review, so that's review of building designs and materials. The land use authority will be the commission instead of the council. Currently, the CR zone has the council as the architecture review. I recommend that simply because every other non-residential zone, C1, residential professional, the senior care zone, town center, professional office, all of those have the planning commission as the architecture review land use authority. Doesn't mean the council can't change it. I was just going with the majority and making it consistent. I've also clarified that the council, for site plans, it's sometimes unclear which side should be the front, rear, or side of the site plan for setback purposes. It wasn't quite clear it was kind of the commission before, but ultimately the council who approves the site plan ultimately should make that call, because that's the orientation of buildings and the like. Appeals for site plans were just a mess. So I'm just saying it's the appeal authority, which is our hearing officer that we've appointed. We appointed a new one fairly recently, Craig Call. So that after the council approves, if there's a dispute over it, it'll go to that appeal authority to decide. I've also specified that fence and walls in those commercial zones come to me for approval, like with every other fence and wall in the city. It wasn't quite clear. It was sometimes planning commission, sometimes council, and sometimes it just said, review materials versus the actual fence. So I just said, the site plan will show where the fence is that the council approves, but the final fence kind of design will end up coming to me. Again, these are my proposals. Anything can be changed. I've added a new line for extension of approvals. In the future, I'd like to make it clear how long approval is good for. We do that for subdivisions. We're not as good about it for other things. So just to be consistent, for subdivisions, it's our DAB, the Development Administration Board. That's the quasi staff board. It's 3 staff members and 2 planning commission members. That's the board we created for subdivision reviews this year. They handle subdivision extensions. It seemed to make sense to make that for all types of approval extensions. Those are more administrative actions. We're just looking, has anything changed that we shouldn't allow this approval to continue? Did we change the code so that we should have them do it again? But if not, why not just let the approval continue so they don't have to go through the whole process again? If any changes happen, then they'll have to go back through the approval process. I've clarified the DRC. I've clarified my role as a zoning administrator for the completeness of land use applications. So before an application can be processed, it has to be submitted to the city. And there's certain things we have to check to make sure it's actually complete, meaning it has everything we need to give it a substantive review. It just wasn't clear in the code who was responsible for that. It's always been the zoning administrator, so I just wrote that into the code. And then finally, I proposed a little bit of cleanup. There's some language about conditional uses transferring. We clarified this recently with an amendment that conditional uses can be changed from owner to owner as long as they're not changing any conditions. So I made that consistent, and I just clarified you can't move a conditional use from one property to another. That's a new conditional use permit. So here is the table. But before I get to that, any questions on any of those items? Yes.
So I was there at the Planning Commission, as you know. Commercial developments, does that fit under planned developments?
So a planned development is a Ridgeview or a Sky Estates. It's a special
that's what
zoning creation.
So where's the commercial in this table?
There's no specific, so the rezone would be granting, like, say a new property wanted to become commercial, so that would have to go through a rezone process. But then development of it is done first, if they have to do a subdivision, there'd be a subdivision plat, or for like across the street here with MNG, it's a site plan approval. So all non-residential zones, so all of our commercial zones, each kind of building and development has to have a site plan showing where they're going to put their parking, where their landscaping is, where their buildings are going to be, how they interconnect, all of those things. So it's a site plan approval process in the table.
So I think coming off of Scott's question, we have any site plan goes to, because we believe the state code stated residential needs to be planning commission and took it away from the council. Is that the same as commercial, or can the council have a say on the commercial?
So the council can still review
Right.
commercial site plans. And in fact, you still are the approval authority for site plans in this table.
No, because on site plans here, it says CC. I guess that would be us as the
City council,
City
yes.
Council. Okay.
So I was just confused. It seems to me in the table it'd be nice to have maybe a subcategory with your commercial things, because when I read this, I thought I was a little confused, because if you get in the weeds of the development code up in the pages 80, 75 and different things where you're doing all the redlining, I wasn't quite sure who the land use authority was, because planning commission and the city council oftentimes were crossed out. So to me, for commercial development, I think the city council should have some say into that, I would hope.
And you do. So the code, the way the zones are written, so all the commercial, the non-residential zones, they're written in that you have to obtain site plan approval to develop it. What someone says going to develop, they'd say, okay, I have to get a site plan approval before I can develop this property. How do I do that? They didn't look at this table and go forward a couple of slides. One more. And they'll say, okay, I need to get site plan approval. Who's my site plan authority? So they'll look at this line on the top here. It says, okay, reviewing body, DRC, so that's staff. Then it has to go get a recommendation from Planning Commission, PC. City Council gives me the final authority, and then if I want to challenge it, it goes to the appeal authority. So the zones say, here's the applications you have to submit to get approval for development. The table says, and for each of those applications, here's who processes it. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that this table covers all commercial development?
It does.
So site plan is unique to commercial development? Is that
Correct.
right?
We do
Yeah.
have site plans for individual home lots, but that's all part of the building permit process. This site plan, we don't, even in our code in our residential zone, we don't even say site plan. We
Yeah.
just say, get a building permit for your home. And then you have
Right.
to show your lot and how you're going to
When
get
I
a
see
driveway in
site
there.
plan, I think commercial.
So yeah, so every commercial zone says, give us a site plan to review for your building and your access and your parking
Right.
and your grading and all of that. And this table says every site plan, so that's every non-residential development comes to council for approval.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So let's assume I came with a 2-lot subdivision and I wanted one to be commercial and one to be residential. Just hypothetical. They can't sneak in underneath the subdivision saying, I'm only a 2-lot subdivision, even though one's commercial.
So assuming the zoning allowed for that, which we wouldn't,
Which I do not.
which nothing in the city would allow for that kind of development, but assuming we had something that did. Actually, we'll take Wild Rose. It's actually a decent example. We have right next to Alpine, no, that's not, that's North County Boulevard. They have one lot that is commercial, and then they had a few residential behind it. So they did a subdivision that went through the normal subdivision approval process that showed here's our commercial lot, and then here's our residential lots and the roads and all of that. That would be approved through the subdivision process. But currently, I've been talking with the developer who wants to develop that commercial property on the front next to the highway there. They're going to have to submit a site plan that I'm going to take to Planning Commission for recommendation and then the council. They know where their lot boundary is, and there's some code restrictions that the council put on when they approved the Wild Rose development. But the site plan will be very detailed as where the building will be, where the parking will be, where their little commercial recreational area and covered seating will be, and that has to be council approval.
So, but let's look at that Wild Rose approval, because it has, like you said, when it got approved, it did have a commercial lot, and then I think it had 5 or 6 home lots.
That's 6.
So we'll come in, and let's just assume that we'd allow it's coming with our subdivision. Let's assume it's only 2 residential and 1 commercial out on 4800 West. With the subdivision having to go to the Planning Commission, would we see it since it has a commercial element in it no matter what, or would they be trying to come underneath the subdivision? My question is, the subdivision goes to Planning Commission, and so I'm going, I understand a site plan when it's commercial, but they might get approved as a commercial lot as a subdivision. I just want to make sure, can the Planning Commission approve a commercial lot in a subdivision because they can see it's a minor plat or things that way?
So for Wild Rose specifically, they could, meaning they could put, because the council approved as part of the plan development for that, as a zoning matter, the council said, this area of your property can be commercial, this area has to be residential. So when they came in for the subdivision, they said, this area is our commercial lot, these are our residential lots. If, the Bueller's annexed into, Highland, got R140 and tried to develop, said, we want to put a commercial lot in this corner, we'd say, no, your zoning is only residential. It doesn't matter. If Longhorn Prop tried to develop, we'd say, you've got R140, you can't just stick a commercial lot in there. You'd have to go through the whole zoning process first, which would come to Planning Commission and then council for approval. And then you'd do a subdivision. If the council decided to grant some kind of commercial anywhere, they do a subdivision that shows, okay, here's our commercial lot. Doesn't have any details to it, just says, this is where it is. Per zoning, we're allowed to have a commercial lot there, so we do. And then the actual development of the commercial lot comes to the council for approval.
At what time? Will it come when they're trying to do the subdivision, or once the Planning Commission's already approved it as a commercial lot?
So, high level zoning. So if someone wants to do commercial, they have to get zoning approval first. That comes to council. To then split the property into different lots and parcels for future development, that's a subdivision, and that would not come to council. But they could only put a lot into a commercial, future commercial use if the council had already approved the zoning for it. And then at the end, the actual development of the commercial lot comes to the council for site plan approval.
So I guess my suggestion was, and I appreciate the mayor's clarification of these things. I'm just looking at this table as a citizen. I'm not a developer, and I'm not the community planning director. And I'm just kind of trying to look for ways to make it real clear. And to me, if it says site plan, I'd probably put in parentheses commercial. So there's no doubt about that. And so we understand site plans are commercial. But that just helps me a little bit because I get looking at this and I see no mention of commercial anywhere. But I get farther into the development code and we've got all this stuff about commercial. I wasn't sure who the land use authority was with all the redlining. So I wanted to clarify that. The other thing is the Plan Commission, just one other little thing on this table, and I'm sorry to be talking a lot here, but Sherry Kramer, if I remember, was the one on accessory units, dwelling units. In Highland City, it's defined as attached or part of the dwelling, right? But if I read that as a developer or a citizen, I would think it was a separate unit, which we haven't approved. So I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be helpful to put attached accessory unit there for the time being, unless we change the general plan and allowed separate ones. Would that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only type
just
of
clarifies
ADU we allow. So yeah, we could put internal or attached as kind of the clarification.
Sure, just a little clarification there.
Same with site plan,
right, commercial. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it would be helpful.
No, those are great clarifications. They're trying to make this table as readable as possible for people.
Right.
Well, so that, and I think that's, because if we do approve it, I guess it'd have to come back. But like I said, the terminology of accessory dwelling unit, then who approves would be different if it was a detached, probably.
Correct. And some cities I've seen who have a table like this, and they do allow detached. They're two separate lines. Okay. One is an internal ADU, and there's approval process, and they have a detached one because it has a little more impact. They usually go through a slightly different process. So we could have it broken down like that. Say the council decided through the general plan process and a future code amendment to allow it. You could have a new line on there that was detached ADUs, and it required council approval. You could make that a requirement of it. But that would all be in the future. But we could just, the way the table works is we could just say, whoever it is, we put in the table so we know who goes, if you want to do something, who do you have to talk to get it approved? So this is the table. There's several footnotes through there. The little asterisks means people have to get a building permit usually with it. So that's ADUs and retaining walls and sometimes signs. On the top where I have kind of the notes for the recommending body and appeal authority, that's just pointing people of what that means for them. Recommending body means you have to receive a formal recommendation, but for several applications, there is no formal recommendation. Often when I approve something, I don't take it to someone else for them to recommend what I do. It just comes to me directly. And the appeal authority has a little note just saying, we have an entire chapter about how appeals work. It just says, it all look back to there to know how your appeal has to work. Yes.
Can I ask one question about the appeal chapter?
Yes.
So on page 14, it's right under number 1. It's kind of 1-2 in blue. And it talks about what can be appealed. And it says informal reviews are not subject to appeal. Very understandable. Formal recommendations, and you've crossed out the Planning Commission and everything, but they usually come from the Planning Commission, are not subject to appeal. And then the last thing it says is legislative actions are not subject to appeal. I thought they were. Am I mistaken on that?
Directly. So that code is all about administrative appeals. So we've had a couple of these come up. If you remember, some of you were on the council, we had the Hollow subdivision came in and the Packards challenged the road location. That was an administrative appeal and it went to our appeal authority. We had a hearing whether the city followed the code correctly in making an approval of that subdivision. It's very different. You can challenge a legislative decision, but it's not, did you follow the code? It's, did the city follow constitutional principles? Did you act in accordance with your legislative authority? And it only goes to district court. It's an entirely different process. So when we say legislative decisions are not subject to appeal, it means you can't just file a normal appeal and say, hey, I want to take that to the appeal authority and see if you got it right and have them weigh in on it. It's, the district court has to weigh in and say, did the city council act so far outside of their discretion that this was kind of an illegal act from the beginning? And it's a different process. So you're right that they can be. It's just a different process that almost never happens.
The analog to appeal for a legislative decision is basically a referendum. Is that?
Yes. The better way of challenging a legislative decision, which we've had in Highland a few times, is a referendum, meaning the citizens don't like what the council has enacted, so they tried to get signatures to challenge it that way.
Sure, but let me just ask, because I'm a little confused on this. I should know better. But, okay, so in a previous council, we planned on, and this is a development, we planned on putting the public safety, not public safety, but the park building in the west side of the Mount, what's not now the Highland Family Park. But the people along there appealed that. So that was a legislative decision that we made, and they appealed it? They lost the appeal.
I believe the appeal was dealing with the approval of the initial site plan, or the rather, which was
development in the park.
So maybe they were challenging the administrative part of where you locate it as part of the site plan approval process. So that's an administrative challenge. Now, if they were to challenge, say, the city's decision to buy the park as a legislative action, or rezone, when the council approved 10700, you went through that whole rezoning process. Someone could theoretically challenge that and say, "Oh, council, you shouldn't have rezoned that." But it's not that normal type of appeal where you just file it with our appeal authority and get a hearing in a few weeks. It's a court case or it's a referendum.
I'll just have to talk to you afterwards, because I don't understand that, because we voted as a council to put the park maintenance building there, and they appealed it, and that seems like a development thing to me. So I'm just wondering.
I think it was a conditional use permit, I want to say, that got approved at the city council level that then they appealed.
So let's go into walk through. So here are the council votes to say we're going to place the park maintenance building there at the Highland Family Park in that corner. We had residents come and say we don't like it. Now, tell us who that went to after. So in this, if that's the case where they have, when you say appeal authority, that's just a one person, and are they just looking to see if we followed the law, or how do they overturn the council? Because I'm worried, because here we're the elected officials, and also you go to one individual who's this appeal authority. What rights and what's the criteria they have to follow to move forward that way?
It's a great question. So it gets tricky here because the council acts both administratively and legislatively. So you will vote as a council on things, but if it's an administrative decision where you're implementing law, it's a different process than when you're acting legislatively, meaning should you sell property to someone? Should you rezone property? That's all legislative. That's all in your discretion. So an administrative appeal is they're looking for two things. One, was your decision contrary to law? So did you violate a state statute? Did you violate your own code in doing it? That's why when a subdivision comes in, and you've heard me say this and probably been annoyed of me saying this, is you have to approve this because they have followed every requirement in our code. Under state law, it says if they meet all those requirements, you have to give them an approval. That's an administrative decision. So it checks, did we violate anything in the law? And is there substantial evidence to support the decision? Which basically, that sounds like a high bar. It's really, did they give enough to show that they really did meet the law? I have litigated cases where there's evidence on both sides. The courts say, that's fine. You can have evidence on both sides. As long as there is something to support the decision, you're fine. So it's a low standard to win an administrative appeal. So they're just checking some kind of support for it in the facts, and did you violate any laws? And if you meet both of those, your decision's fine.
Is that important then as a council when we're making that motion to state why and what our finding, like we have to have findings as stating our findings why we made that decision?
So for administrative decisions, that's why staff often has recommended findings in our report. And we say, we recommend in your motion you adopt the findings because those findings are the evidence supporting the decision. And we also walk through the analysis of why we think it meets the zoning code and why, we have those long lists of things because we're trying to show in case it does get appealed. No, we looked at the law, we examined it, the council considered the appropriate things, and they made the right decision.
Now, we're doing our park. We have on the baseball diamond, we have a building coming, a scores building or a storage building. If the residents didn't like where that storage building, here as a council, we said we've approved, and funded. Could they go fight that building there at the park that we didn't follow some criteria? How does that follow?
So I won't say they can't fight it because you can fight anything if you file a case about it, but there's not a good avenue. They'd have to try to find some way either we had to do some process beforehand to approve it, or somehow we did something illegal in doing it. A good example of the illegal question, Highland Glen. There was a road that got improved there, and there was a whole lawsuit. It's well before my time.
Yes.
But the challenge was there's a state law that says you can't build a road unless it conforms to your general plan. This is what we've talked about with 4800 West. And the city had tried to expand a road, and there's some dispute of whether that was actually in the city's general plan or not. I think it actually was successful, if I recall correctly, or at least partially successful. I don't remember the details. But that was a decision of state law says you can't do a road unless it's in your general plan. We're challenging on the basis of it's not in your general plan, rather than this isn't a good idea or not. That's different from saying you built a park and you put a facility in there we don't like. There's no code that says you have to build a park in a certain way. So that kind of tease out the difference a little bit.
Back on the park maintenance building with that appeal, to me, the most cogent argument that they had was that by separating it out from the park, the requirement for landscaping percentage was not handled. And in the appeal, they said, yes, that's true, but this is not a final approval, and so that doesn't have to happen until a final approval. But that would be the kind of thing you're talking about, where we have some specific rules, we don't follow them. Therefore, if it was an administrative decision, we're open to losing on appeal.
Correct. So, for example, fencing, we gave ourselves an exemption for allowing chain link fencing. Theoretically, if we put in, prior to making that change, if we put in a pump station and built a chain link fence around it, someone could challenge that and say, your code says you can't do chain link. And they could probably succeed on that. So that's why we've amended our code to exempt ourselves from it, so they can't challenge that decision. So that's the kind of things they could challenge. If our code says you must do this on your property and we don't do it, sure. But just, hey, you located it in the middle of the park and we didn't like that. We think it'd be better over here. There's no real basis to challenge that.
Yeah, we exempted ourselves on the big storage bins too.
Yes.
Okay, that's very helpful. I just read that and I thought, no, wait a minute, because they appealed the park maintenance building. I didn't understand that. So
I think these are good examples to go look at Wild Rose, to go look at the park, to understand what we're putting here in code, because this is changing how the residents will look to see how to get approval, or anyone coming to the city.
I mean, these are very important principles of land use law. So this touches on the heart of it, of how an application gets approved and appealed, and it's very important. So I'm glad you're asking questions. I'm happy to explain it. This is one of my favorite topics. So I've highlighted in yellow the things that have changed slightly. Everything else is mostly just consolidating it into this table. So ADUs, I approve. Accommodation requests, those have come up in the group home context of wanting an exception to the code. Those come to council. Annexations are legislative. That's what those two little daggers mean. And so that means it goes to planning commission if the council asks, and then the council for approval. The application complete status is me. Architecture review. So this is the review of building materials and designs for commercial sites. We can't do it for residential sites. It's only for commercial sites. We have certain standards, earth tones on buildings, mix of materials, those kinds of things. So I've highlighted here because in all but one commercial zone, the planning commission is the approval authority, is the land use authority. And then the council is the appeal authority from the planning commission's decision. So I wanted to highlight there was one zone where the council was the land use authority for the architecture review. I proposed just having it be consistent throughout and making that planning commission, because that was majority. But I wanted to highlight that for you to consider as moving forward, that there is a little bit of a change.
So let me ask you Mrs. Rice, came up during public comment and made a comment about, hey, if this one area changed, would that be more a site plan change? We understand has to come back to now. Correct. My question will be minor site plan changes versus, because you have down here minor goes to staff and major. So where would the minor change be, saying, hey, at what level do we also state this has to come back to council versus a minor? And then on the architectural review is what would be minor and major on any of those changes?
So I'll give you two answers, unfortunately. generally, any change to a site plan would have to come back to council for review. Kind of like a subdivision. When you approve it finally, they get not stuck with it, but they get locked into that. We've had Foxwood Estates come back and try to amend their plat because they had an approval. They can't change it. Even if everyone wants the change, they can't change it without coming to council. Site plans, by and large, are the same way. Once they get an approval, they get locked in to that approval, and if they want to change it, they have to go through the whole process again, even if it's relatively minor. If it's an engineering thing where, we need to move this utility line a little bit, or, there's a conflict between a storm drain inlet and an ADA ramp, the engineer can just, move those out 6 inches, that's fine, it doesn't come to council. But if it's relocating a building or an access, that'll all come to council. With M&G's development specifically, the council has a development agreement in place that was executed back in 2007 and then amended fairly recently, where the council approved a site plan concept that basically said, this is the arrangement of parking and buildings with details to be approved by staff. So for M&G site plan specifically, the council has a development agreement with the developer that says staff gets to approve or has to approve the final details of the site plan. So for M&G's case, when it gets modified, that only comes to staff as long as they stay within the general concept of that plan. Meaning, I've had a discussion with them, they had their setbacks wrong on their parking. And so I'm saying, no, you have to bump your parking 5 feet back from the property line because you have supposed to have 10 feet from your property line. But it's still the same parking configuration, they're just shifting it a little bit. So that will come back. Now, if they tried to propose an entirely new configuration of buildings, they'd have to come back to council for that.
So that's if a building, let's say, was 7,000 square feet, and now they're going down to 6,000 square feet, would that be staff level? And I'm just talking to M&G, is that enough of a site change, or is that just a staff change in the building size?
That would be a staff change under the development agreement. Okay. Because you didn't approve necessarily a square footage of the building. You said building, plus minus 7,000 square feet, but it wasn't you must be at least 5,000 and no more than 6,000. It was a concept for that. So those kind of changes would be staff approved. Same with the design of the buildings.
What about the open courtyard? If they decide not to do that open courtyard, or
back to council, that would be a significant change. Okay. If they try to remove that and just put parking in there or just a walkway, I would say, no, you had a courtyard here and 4 buildings around it. You can't change, you can shift, shrink your wall a little bit, sure. You can't remove a building or add a building, separate the 4 into 6, or add a new building in the middle. That would all require council approval.
And just to be sure that I'm understanding, the approval by staff of changes in the case of M&G is unrelated to the land use authority table and the changes that we're talking about tonight. For any future case, that would only happen if council approved a development agreement that had that same stipulation in it.
Correct.
Okay.
So specifically, we have a list in that development agreement where the council said, we agree you've met all these requirements from the code. We've approved your site plan. We've approved your architectural design generally. And then we approve staff to do the final details on all of those items.
Okay, now Mr. Freeze has been here tonight, Corey Freeze. He comes and says, hey, I have a fence. I'd like to do something with that fence to build access. He looks at our table here. Where would that help direct his land use? Would it be underneath fences? How does that work? If he's looking at this, how would this help guide him?
So this table doesn't address that. And actually, this was a question that I can't remember if it was Councilmember Smith or Courtney who raised it. I made a reference in the code about right-of-way permits. Those are not in our development code. Those are in our municipal code because it deals with the control of city property, not development of land. We have some references to driveway standards in terms of how you can develop your property. But if someone says, I want to get additional use of city property in a way that isn't part of a subdivision or a building permit or something like that, either it's right-of-way permit or there is no process for this, which means council. It always defaults back, if there is nothing else that really addresses it, it falls back to the council for approval.
Okay, can I ask another question then?
Of course.
And I want to give some examples just from previous experiences I've had on the council. So, for example, in the CR zone up there, you know, the commercial buildings are kind of right out on the street, the parking behind the buildings. So when I was on the council, I think my first term, Walgreens came to us and they wanted to develop that corner where CVS is now. And they said, you know, we don't like the parking behind our building. And so that, I guess, was a site plan change, but it came to the council and we approved the parking in front. Now, Walgreens sold to CVS, but that's why that's different there. So, and I think it was a wise decision, but it came back to the council. So that's a site plan change? Is that why that came back to the council?
For them over there, that's a site
The
plan
council was over everything
Yes,
there at that
council
time.
was over everything, and
Oh.
so still would be under site plan changes. Like
Okay,
that.
so the next example I have, when the Norton Athletic Center across the street from Ace Hardware came in, you know, when they presented that, and I said, you know, it makes sense to me to look at that again and maybe put the parking in front instead of in back, because they'll park up and down the street and over in Ace Hardware's parking lot, which is exactly what happened, but I was told there was no way we could change that. Now, why is that? Why couldn't that have come back as a sign? That's the C1 zone.
Was
It's
that
in the town, I think it's the town center.
Town center,
It's
isn't
the
that
town center
C1?
development.
Or is it over that
Oh,
side?
I think
Yeah.
stipulated that.
So I
Exactly. I think it would have required a code change, which could have happened. It just, you would have had to do the code change first and then approve the application, if that makes sense, because the code for that particular zone required the parking to be in the back.
So I guess my question is if the DRC committee looks at something and says, you know, everything meets code, so we have to do it that way, but do you ever look at things and say common sense says maybe we ought to look at this differently and maybe discuss in the council? Does that ever happen? Because the other example I have is when, you know, we developed the commercial area over in Ridgeview. And, you know, I think we did the best we could there, but there was obviously problems with entrance and exit that we finally had to fix with some expense. And I'm just wondering, at times when you see things that just don't seem right, do you come back to the council even though it meets code, or do we just plow through and follow the code?
So
Yeah.
Great question. It's somewhat a matter of judgment, and sometimes it's a matter of how much is the developer willing to work with us. There are times when we will work with a developer who is great to work with, and they understand. You know, we'll make a comment, and they'll say, you know what, that does make sense. Let's find a solution to it, and they'll go back and forth with us on it. There's times we have proposed things, and they say, show us in your code where you can require that from us. And if you can't, we're moving forward. And so in those situations, we will kick it forward, and we can't do too much with it. You know, I was talking with WPI about a potential site plan, so I offered some suggestions about how something could be worked better. Not that it was a code requirement, but hey, I think this might be a good idea. And like, oh, that does make sense. You know, we'll incorporate those concepts and see what we can do. That's great. There's no code that says, you know, exactly how certain things should be. Sometimes though, it does come down to we push for certain things and we get what we can. I mean, sometimes we miss things. We're human, so we don't have every idea, but we do try our best to get a good solution. And sometimes the developer will work with us, and sometimes they'll say, well, if your code doesn't say I have to do it, I'm not going to do it. And if you gave me an entitlement for a site plan, or you gave me a zoning or plan development that says I get to do exactly this, and there's 3 entrances, and I will do nothing more than that, we say, okay, let's work with what we've got and make it the best we can. It's not a great answer, because it really comes down to the specifics of what the site is and who we're working with.
Can I ask one more question about the Ridgeview development? So, is it the developer up there that makes decisions like we're going to put the health spa right on the east-west corridor, when it would probably been better to reverse it, because like Sip and Dip and some of these other businesses are really needed frontage so that people could see that they were there? Do you have any leeway on that, or you just have to do what the developer wanted to do?
part of it is I think with Ridgeview, we had 4 commercial kind of pads approved, but we didn't have any details about what uses in which one or what their building size would be. So they kind of build, and then the property owner decides who they want to lease to and who they can get in there. We would maybe recommend, hey, this looks like a better position for this type of thing.
So as the DRC, you could recommend and say,
and sometimes we suggest it like, hey, this is great for a drive-through, which means put a drive-through in so we can get a restaurant there. Sometimes Wild Rose, I'm in discussions with Wild Rose. That little commercial area was kind of anticipated to be a restaurant type use.
Right.
That's not who is proposing to develop there, but they're proposing an allowed use. So it's okay. How can I make the code? Work for them, because if they want to build, they're entitled to, but also get the best thing for the city and our recreational areas that we're supposed to have with Wild Rose in a way that makes sense for everyone.
And they do realize there's a high school across the street that would spend a
Recognizing
lot
there's
of
a high
money there
school
for
across the
food.
street,
Yeah.
and a lot of things, but
the
ultimately I
user
can't
that's
tell a
looking
property
is
owner who to
not
lease
worried
to.
about their high school students. But
Okay, thank you.
And Scott, I think you should bring up. We have to always remember our history. This town center, where we have our city offices, originally the commercial was supposed to be back in here. That's why you see your Burt Brothers Tire back in here. You even see some Ace Hardware. And as it's changed, that commercial fill, it used to be if there was a drive-through, they turned it down. I think Taco Amigos, which has a ground next to Arctic Circle,
Which was sad.
got turned down. And you're going back, how councils and things, and as it changed, now you bring up over at Ridgeview, and I'm just good. We have a developer in Boyer that they are very skilled in commercial development. You would think that they would be thinking about how that commercial development would come together. And if you remember, Scott, when they very first proposed it, we were fighting to make sure they had 7 acres of commercial, and in their development agreement, they had that it would convert after so many years just to residential.
Right.
And we kind of fought as a council saying, no, we want to keep, we believe that would be a commercial corridor. Now, as you look over there in that Costa Vida and Arby's, that 4800 West, we can't grant access because that is a state highway. It's the same as we have out here in Timpanogos. Over where Myers is at, and we've had, the new ice cream shop and Shabby's come in. That whole parking area is terrible. So my question now going to come, we have a pad that's there by Wendy's. You brought up WPI, maybe looking at things. That, as we come through, as we look at our site here, that will come down. They still have to come, and they'd have to have a site plan approval, right?
Correct.
So that would then, we'll be seeing that as a council on that plan.
You will. And whatever they propose for their site plan and overall parking area will have to be approved by the council.
But you have certain stipulations on how much parking they need, right?
Correct.
You can't overlap your parking with the other businesses, can you?
No, there's a bunch of rules about parking. So, and this is kind of more just the process, is staff works with the applicant, and we usually have a few rounds back and forth. Subdivisions, there's a very clear back and forth process. Site plans also go through it. And we put in every code requirement to make sure they meet all of those. And we usually try to work with them on how can we make the site work better. And we'll give our ideas on it through that discussion phase. Eventually get to a point where on those things that aren't code required, they'll either agree with us and put them in or not, and ask at some point to be moved forward. We don't hold them at staff forever. We can't. It has to move forward. Ultimately, staff is just a recommending. We have decent power in that we can say, well, if we move the application forward now, the council's going to deny it. So fix this thing first, because let's not waste everybody's time. But after it gets kind of past that point, then it's on more kind of suggestion things. I think the council would really like to see this, and they'd be a little more excited about this project and kind of push it that way. But ultimately it comes, all right, let's go to planning commission, get their recommendation, and then let's take it to council. And that's when we have our recommendations of what to add, but ultimately it comes down to council approval.
Can I just say one last thing? Rob, I think you're doing an excellent job, and I appreciate it. It's hard to work through all this, but I appreciate the work you put into this. And, it's helping me understand things better, and I've been here quite a long time, so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I hope I can explain things well enough.
So what we have in front of us, the yellow is what is being changed on who the approval is, correct?
To some degree, yes. So again, architecture review in all zones but one, that was planning commission. So for that one extra zone, I'm saying we'll just make that planning commission, and appeals come to council. That's the review of building design and materials and all of that. get approved by council, or get approved by commission, not by council.
So council, just where most of the commercial architectural is coming in under this, is it the CR zone or C1? I'm just saying,
You've
what
asked, I
we're
forgot.
saying now is commercial would go to planning commission on all reviews for architectural.
I think it was CR that was the city council.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
CR was city council. Everywhere else was planning commission.
But this now would be saying that CR now.
that CR is also planning commission for architecture review.
That's the change.
So can we go to the next slide? Continuing, development code amendments, legislative, so planning commission, then council. Extension of approvals. This is a little bit of a change. So I mentioned this earlier. Some of our approval or applications don't have a kind of an expiration date. I want to propose some code amendments in the future that you only get a year or so. Otherwise, you have to get an extension because we don't want approvals just hanging out there indefinitely as we update our code over time. Subdivisions has been our development administration board. I propose that that would just continue for all extensions. So that would be site plan extensions, conditional uses, and subdivisions. All those administrative approvals where it already got approval and it's just continuing it for another year period after it would normally expire.
And this doesn't change the duration of the extension or the initial approval. It seems like one of them was 6 months. It's just who the bodies are that.
It's just who the bodies are. So the planning commission actually was the approval authority for extensions on conditional use permits. There's some limitation of you have to start building your conditional use within, I think, a year or two. If you didn't, you have to get an extension of it. If it's already gone through the whole public hearing process, it seemed like staff could extend it as long as nothing has changed in the meantime. And what I would propose in the future is we have a list of things of why an extension can't be granted. And it's if you want to change something, or if our code changed, or surrounding properties have changed, so it doesn't make sense to develop in the same way. If any of those are present, we don't grant an extension. You have to come back for new approval.
So why, let me just understand, why do we want to eliminate the council totally from any architectural approval?
I was just being consistent.
Just because that's the way we've done in other zones?
In other zones. You could absolutely make a change there. I just kind of went with majority.
So, and this, I think this had to do with conditional use permit. When the Pattersons built those storage areas, we worked on architecture quite a while because the neighborhood was quite upset about the look. That's a different thing because it was a conditional use permit, it had to come to the council?
That's a little bit different and still would come to council. We actually had a proposed, it's because that's by development agreement and zoning. So any change in those things have to come to council and still would for the Patterson property specifically. We actually had a proposal that was kind of working its way through planning commission and then stalled. So those kind of changes would still come to council where they wrote it into the code for the zone, but for everyone else, generally it has been just planning commission. I recall, I think it was the C1 zone. There was some kind of architecture approval that the planning commission granted because that's who was the authority. And the council didn't love it and asked if they could put conditions on it. And I had to say, you can't because you told the planning commission that they get to be the approval authority on it. So that's what I would basically recommend just so we have, my preference is not particularly who approves it. I just want it to be consistent. So when someone says, I'm building a commercial site, who do I have to talk to get my buildings approved? I can say, it's this body, look at this line. So if you want to make it council, I'm good with that. If you want to leave it at planning commission, I'm good with that too.
So let's go back. Scott, you brought it up there at the Patterson warehouses by in front of their storage units. Underneath this with the architectural review, if we approve the site plan, because we haven't maybe even seen the architectural aspect of the site, it's just the way the buildings lay out. Because at the council, Mr. Braithwaite actually got pretty involved in trying to work with Patterson and with the residents to make that, because it was called residential feel.
Yes.
Does that make sense? That was the wording that needed to have a residential feel with the architectural aspect. And Patterson worked with us to get that. But right now, that would go to planning commission. We would never see that residential feel. If the planning commission felt it had residential feel, it would be approved. Is that correct?
Correct, with one caveat. For the Patterson development specifically, we have a development agreement. No, it's not a development. It's actually in the zone. We have exhibits that says each building had a drawing for it. And there's like a sketch drawing of like the residential feel for each building on their site. The planning commission would just be saying, all right, we have this sketch drawing. Do the plans look like that? And they would be approving that, making sure it matched, that their final drawings actually matched that concept plan that got originally approved. And if it doesn't, the planning commission would then reject it. Now, if they came back and said, we don't really want to build that house-looking style for an office anymore, we want to do something different, then we'd say, okay, you can propose that, but that's a zoning change, and you have to go talk to the council about changing that. And we go through
Why would it be a zoning change when it's architectural look?
It's because in that zone specifically, you wrote so all of our zones have architectural guidelines that say, use these colors, use this kind of mix of materials, don't use these roof styles, all of that. For the Patterson development, the PL zone, you went beyond that. You didn't just say, don't use, I forget even some of the examples, don't use metal siding. It was, make the building look like this drawing specifically. And so that's in the zone. So it's not just a concept, it is make your building look like this. So if they want to deviate from that, they have to change the zone itself.
I'm sorry, and I've talked too much, and I apologize. But
they're good questions, those.
Though I kind of struggle a little bit with the architectural thing because it is the face of the city. So I guess as a council, the influence we'd have in architecture is the code we put together, and we probably ought to review that. My only concern is, and it's just kind of from an overall view, I really appreciate all the work the staff does. But, our senior staff doesn't live in Highland, right? And I really appreciate the Plan Commission. They live in Highland, but they are appointed. And so it's kind of like, it kind of removes the elected officials a little bit from things quite a bit. I'm just wondering if that's what we really want. I mean, I don't want to have to approve every building and different things particularly, but I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can have a little input, especially if it's something that, is kind of in your face. I don't know what you think, Mayor, but I just think it would be good the council have some input on the architecture other than changing all the code. So maybe it'd be nice if we even, like in a discussion item or that, say, hey, this is what's coming through, do you have any, if we have a little input or something. Because it's like, I don't know how many people have asked me what that one building is behind Costa Vida, and I said, I don't know. We never talked about it on the council. And so I think as a member of the council, I'd like to know what's going on a little bit. I don't know.
So I see three options to have more council input, and it kind of ranges on influence versus decision. So you could just make the council the land use authority. So every building has to come to you for approval of the
You're
material.
talking just commercial.
This is for the commercial.
Yeah, just commercial. Yeah, I'm not talking about anything else.
The architectural approval, you can make it just the council is the approving body for that. So that's at kind of one end. You could go through and change the code and review all those architectural styles and say, okay, let's get a little more detailed, more like the Patterson side of the development where we had very specific ideas of what we wanted. And then the planning commission just matches those up, but they have a lot clearer guidance on what to do. And then the kind of the lowest level of, control would be staff just says, hey, architecture review for M&G or, Ridgeview or something is coming up. It's going to planning commission at the end of this month. Council, here's their concept drawings. If you have comments, come to the planning commission or send them your comments.
And we could come as a citizen.
Come as citizens and residents and give your comments so they can consider that in making their decision.
Yeah,
so,
if I was aware of it, so I could at least have some input, I'd be happy to come to the planning commission.
I think, Council, the question maybe would be, do we want commercial architectural review to come in? I mean, when I've been on the council, that's where a lot of residents sometimes come and
get upset.
Commercial, they see, your house, and I understand, if you look, there might have been, and I guess, okay, let's do, here you have 10700, what they're saying. They had a different architectural look than other areas that they had in town center. I don't know if we want to have that type of architectural review, but do we want architectural review as a council over commercial, or are we okay with all architectural review going to planning commission and having them be the final body? I think that's the question.
And I think there's...
Oh, go ahead. I agree with Scott that I would like to have some input. It also seems like there's so little commercial left to develop that it's not like we have commercial coming, every meeting and we're spending lots of time on it. So I agree that I would like to know what's coming.
Now, when you're saying like to know, would you like to be the approval of the land use authority on that as we look here? Or are you wanting just to say we want, And I'm just gonna, if you just say be apprised of it, you really don't have any say. You can say, oh, I like that look, but you're not the approval body. You want to be the one that approves it and say yes, or you want to just say, it feels good, go ahead. And just, does that make, that's what I think we have to decide.
I think we do have possibly a fourth option in there to make and it's a weird fourth option, but to make the city council an optional recommending body.
But that means we're recommending to the planning commission, but they don't have to still list you. Are you going to be okay as a council that you're the recommending, but you don't have the final authority?
I'm not arguing in favor of that. It just seems like logically that is a fourth option that we have.
You could stick, normally it goes planning commission council on the table. You could put council then planning commission. So it comes to council first for recommendation, and then planning commission makes the final decision, and they could do what you'd sometimes do, which is ignore your recommendation entirely and do something differently. But you could have that built in, or we can make it more of an informal thing of staff informs council that it's coming up, gives you the ideas, and then says it's coming to planning commission on this date. Up to you entirely.
We still need to have a public hearing on this. So if the
we're not quite through yet either.
Yeah,
so
that's what I say. We're going to. Anyway, just be thinking that might be something we're going to have to discuss on who's that approval authority on the architecture. I know there.
Right. I just think it's important, but we don't have a lot of architecture coming unless there's commercial someday somewhere else in the city.
We have Wild Rose, WPI, their last pad here. Sky Estates has a little bit of commercial. I have not talked to anyone about it, so I don't know if anything's coming in there. Other than that, there's not much commercial left.
How about the pad where the hospital may?
And that too. So there's a
hospital ER.
Some kind of medical facility will come in.
Like I said, it's not. We're not talking that we're having something every meeting or maybe even every quarter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and just highlighting fence and wall permits. It's still zoning administrator. The change here is that it was a little bit confusing in the commercial zones. It talked about the council or the commission approved walls. My thought is the council approves the location of walls as part of the site plan and where they go. But ultimately, the details of that will be administered by staff and the zoning administrator, as we do with every other wall. I mean, usually they throw in a detail of what the wall looks like for the council to review, and we ask for that. So that'd be how that approval would be handled. But
Rob?
Yes.
I'm sorry to go back to this same item again, but something else with regard to the architectural review. The city council is listed as the appeal body, the appeal authority. Is that because that's the way it currently is in the code?
Yes.
Okay.
It always says planning commission makes a decision and then appeals are heard by council. Theoretically, the council could also appeal the decision of the planning commission and then hear it. That is an option if you fully.
So we could appeal it and hear it.
The appeal authority has the authority
without an appeal, without
somebody. Either the council as a body or a member of the council could challenge the planning commission's decision on architecture review, in which case the council.
As long as they met the requirements, they're going to go.
You're checking to see if they met the requirements of the code.
You can't say they approve pink. I don't want pink because if okay. Does that make sense? They're looking at the legality.
Okay. Let's go to. I just wanted to highlight here plan development. So those are basically all legislative actions. So those are your ridge views and wild roses. The approval is legislative, so council. Extensions of those approvals, council. Major amendments are council. Minor amendments are staff. We've issued, just for example, a few minor amendments, but those have been 10700 had a question about could they have a projection of their patio into a setback, and staff approved it because the council had approved limited setback projections for the residential zones. So staff said, well, council was fine with that for all these other residential zones. We'll allow a similar type of thing as a minor amendment for just a patio type thing.
What about the 3-inch overhang or whatever it is? Is that minor?
We could not approve that as a minor amendment. They wanted us to. And I told them no, because that violates fire code. And so if you want to do that, we gave them a bunch of options, but they were all legislative actions. And then they tried one and it didn't work. And they had a few more options and they didn't try those either. So,
okay.
All right. Now we can go on the next slide.
Rob, actually on this slide for just one quick question. The plan developments extensions, is that an extension of
The zoning itself.
Okay.
When the council grants a plan development, it usually says you have this zoning for 2 years and you have to start construction. And if you don't, we can start the process of unzoning it, rezoning it back to what it was. Basically, it's not to have the job of a plan development is not you got an entitlement, now go sit on it for several years. It's you got Ridgeview, now go build Ridgeview. And if you don't within a certain amount of time, we'll take it away from you.
Right.
So that's why if it's going to be extended, the council has to decide, yes, we're still fine with this plan development continuing in the future.
What about a site plan? Does a site plan get renewed? Who approves the
Site plan does not currently have an expiration date.
Okay.
It's one of the things I want to add in. It will be the DAB, the Development Administration Board, who will do an extension on that.
Would it be, it is a little bit unclear to me looking at the extension of approval versus extensions under plan developments, what the difference is. If that were, I don't know, zoning extension or something, does that?
Yes. I like the comments on making the table more readable. That's great. Zoning extension. Okay. Now I think we can go to the next slide. Sorry, Brooklyn. Nothing changed on this list, but just to highlight for you, I've kind of grouped all the property adjustments together. So a lot of parcel combinations and parcel boundary adjustments are all staff. Same with vacations of public utility easements, but any other amendment to a subdivision plat has to come to council still. Residential facilities, group homes come to council. Sensitive lands are just put in there so people know that we have that as a thing. Staff reviews it. The approval is part of the overall land application, though. Like with Foxwood Estates subdivision, we had a sensitive lands report done by staff, or by the applicant, reviewed by staff, but it was approved through the subdivision process. Signs are all staff, so I approve those. And then on the next slide is the final thing. Site plans, we've been talking a lot about that. So staff reviews, planning commission recommends, council approves, and then our appeal authority there. Under subdivisions, this is the note that Councilmember Smith recommended and the planning commission liked, just highlighting that these are subdivisions for under existing zoning, and if you want something different, you have to get legislative approval of it. Then I clarified the difference between major and minor. So major subdivisions are 3 or more lots, or you're building a road. So, for example, that annexation we had off of 9600 North, where they're doing a 2-lot split, that is going to be processed as a major subdivision because they have to build a road down there. It requires a more intensive review process by staff and the city. So major subdivisions, the preliminary plat goes to planning commission. This is all the new state law that went into effect in January this year, whereas final plats only go to staff. And the final approval authority is that Development Administration Board, 3 staff members and 2 members of the planning commission. Variances are our appeal authority is the land use authority on that. And then zoning map amendments, so rezones, go to the council as a legislative action. So that's our land use table that I have proposed.
Okay, give us an example of a variance just so we can kind of.
We had one that got granted. It was for a fence. So our code says you have to, when you're next to a road, you have to be set back 14 feet from curb. We went through that discussion. They had a fence. It was not quite the end. It was like a cul-de-sac that was supposed to continue into a road, but the road never got built. It just dead-ended into the back of their property. They built a fence on there. Our code says, even though it's a dead-end road and there's no sidewalks, no one can ever walk past there, you have to set your fence back 14 feet. The appeal authority heard that and said, well, that deprives them of a property right. There's no benefit to the city. It doesn't advance the goals and objectives of the city. And he granted the variance to allow them to have their fence on their property line where there was no sidewalk and it wasn't an intended effect. Variances are exceptions to the code, but they can't be granted for preference or economic reasons, and they can't be self-imposed. So if you decide, I need my pool in this location because that's where the sun is best, that's not a variance. If they decide, I need this setback for my garage because it has to be more than 5% because I need to fit 6 cars rather than 5, that's not a variance. Those would all have to be code amendments.
And when you say self-imposed, am I also correctly understanding that if I say my pool has to be here because I built a garage over there. That would
be a self-imposed. It says, well, you chose to build your garage there. Sorry.
Well, it's self-imposed also if you're trying to put a pool in. It's not required you have a pool in your backyard.
Pools, we have a lot of requests from residents saying, can I get a variance for my pool? And I tell them, you can try. 99% of the chance it will not go anywhere because pools are not a substantial property right. You don't need a pool to enjoy being able to live on your property. So
now let me just ask you, the exception, okay, back here on subdivision, it says subdivision conform to current zoning regulations except required legislative approval. Why don't we just put down city council approval? Because that's the only legislative that can approve that is city council, correct?
I wanted to highlight, it's not just council approval. They're not coming to say through the subdivision process, give me an exception through this. It is, you have to ask for legislative approval, meaning a code type change or a zoning change. It's more than just council approval. It's the council acting as the legislative body of the city.
I have two other items, but am happy to wait until after the public hearing if you prefer to do it that way.
Yeah, but you still need to finish some.
I still have a couple more things. Sorry. These are the footnotes of the table. I've already gone over them, so we can.
Could I, in that case?
Yes.
Oh, these are footnotes for the table. That's okay.
Okay. I had one more amendment. I was going through the code again, and I saw one place where I missed changing planning commission or council to land use authority. In the residential professional and professional office, the residential professional is near here. It's kind of on the outskirts of our commercial area. Professional office is the Patterson development off Highland Boulevard. Every use in those zones are conditional uses. They each have a provision that says if your use isn't listed in the conditional uses, it has to be evaluated and could be allowed if it's compatible or the same type of use. So, for example, Planning Commission reviewed a little while ago, we have Zana Jewelry up there, and they wanted to do kind of a retail jewelry shop. And so the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission was told to review uses, because it didn't fit the list of conditional uses, so the commission had to look at it and say, does this fit the zone? And they said, the retail portion does not, because it says in the zone, no general retail. So they approved it, but only as a by appointment only consultation type business. So the zone does exist, but they don't have customers like walk-in customers. They don't have a storefront for them. When I was looking at this, okay, I said, well, okay, I need a land use authority for this. These are all conditional uses. Why not just make it the conditional use authority, which is council? So this actually would be a change from planning commission reviewing this to council reviewing this. I feel that's appropriate because you would approve the conditional uses for any uses in those areas. You should also approve that they were trying to kind of be a conditional use to see if it fits or not. So on the next page, I would, here's the additional suggestion is, in the zone, any use not expressly listed shall be evaluated by the conditional land use authority, who is the council, determine if it's consistent with the use of the zone, compatible with all the other listed uses, and compatible with adjacent properties. So there's two zones. I just want to make that clarification that those things should also come to the council for approval. And with that, I think I have finally, that is the end of my presentation. Are there anything else you have questions about or want to suggest changes to?
We talked about this briefly after the Planning Commission meeting, Rob, and I've decided that it is something that I care about. That we're currently using appeal authority to mean two different things. That we have the, I don't have the code reference right in front of me, but the hearing officer who functions as the appeal authority, which is the term used in our code, and now the fifth column in the land use authority is the appeal authority, which is sometimes that code-based appeal authority. Sometimes it is a city council. Sometimes it is a district court. I would like to change the term we use in the table to appeal body, so that we don't have a case where we have the term appeal authority that means two different things in our code, if nobody has an objection to that. There is a specific appeal authority defined in our code, which is the hearing officer that we appoint to hear appeals and variances. And then one of the categories, we have reviewing body, recommending body, land use authority, and appeal authority, which sometimes is that same appeal authority, but sometimes is a different body. And to eliminate using the same term for two different things, I would just like to go with appeal body for the heading of the table, and then cascade that out
everywhere else.
Do you have any
I'll support that.
objections to that, Rob?
No, it
Okay.
can be implemented.
The second thing I have is really not a for tonight item, but just looking through it, I am a little bit skeptical about using the city council as the appeal body, particularly in cases where the zoning administrator is the land use authority, because us as a city council, we are going to be relying on our city attorney to really help us determine whether or not the law has been followed. And when we have a case where our zoning administrator and our city attorney are the same person, that seems like a really odd situation. So that's not something that I think we want to address tonight, but it is something that I would like to discuss going forward.
What you're saying is if someone went to our planner and they did it, their appeal is the city council, but we would get then a legal opinion from our attorney, which at this current time is our planner.
Yes, there is a bit of an oddity there. There is.
Have we had that often? How often has that come up?
It's come up, I'll say a couple of times in different scenarios. So, for example, the Alpine food storage business. I acted as the kind of, hey, we're going to revoke your license, but then I also gave the council a recommendation on what to do, and both my take on it and what I believe were the kind of the facts of the case for the council to make a decision on. So something like that has kind of happened where I made a decision that was kind of being challenged and then being brought to the council for a final decision. I'm trying to think of a land use type
but
matter.
Let me ask you, on that, where was the planner? Because that seems to be more of a code administrator, and that's not the planner position.
It's not, but it's kind of the role I was filling as code enforcement type thing.
Okay.
So it's not land use.
Because to me, that would have been our code enforcer doing that business permit, not renewing it, and then having the attorney give us the guidance through that. But like,
Correct.
where would be an example of a planner? Does that make sense? Like, where's someone in the planning aspect where the planner might say, we don't approve this, they want to come appeal it to us, and then it would be come back to the attorney.
So I'm trying to think there's times that I've made recommendations as the planner of stipulations on approval, and the developer has challenged that for the council to hear.
Okay.
I can't think of any example, specific off the top of my head of when that's happened.
In the table, it looks like it occurs for plan developments, minor amendments, for most of the property adjustments that don't involve right of way.
So,
and again, I don't know that I'm not advocating that we make a decision about that this evening. We haven't really thought about it. But I would like to consider the possibility of changing that to the appeal authority instead of the city council as the appeal body.
I will say with plan developments, the minor exception, it was really nice having the council as the appeal body, because when 10700 asked for a minor amendment and we said, no, I don't think that's a minor amendment, they said, well, who can we challenge that to? I said, the city council, who would also be reviewing this as a major amendment, so you might as well just take it to them as a major amendment. That was kind of nice in a way, because it just says, well, go talk to the council then.
And I think that's a good way to go. I kind of think it's good to have the city council. In that instance,
I get nervous on any land use. Also, we go give it to someone. Our representation elected to represent the residents and the best.
But we're not allowed to represent the residents when we're the appeal authority. We are specifically not allowed to do that.
Well, but that was our job. So when we're the appeal authority, we are still representing, because the residents coming asking for us they're appealing it to us. We're the land use authority.
There's a difference between being the land use authority and being the appeal authority.
And that's the question that we need to understand is when it's the appeal authority, what's the different role? When you're saying appeal versus the council, would we still not want, we'd still listen to the resident?
Yes, your job is a little bit different. So the land use authority is deciding,
Did we follow the code?
did you follow the code? The appeal authority is deciding, is whoever made the decision, did they have enough information and law to make that decision?
Right.
Which is similar, but there's a little bit of a nuance difference there.
The appeal authority is a quasi-judicial
It is.
hearing.
Though, I mean, this is for consideration. The items that would be appealed to the council from a decision I make are minor amendment for plan developments, lot or parcel combinations, parcel boundary adjustments, and vacations of public utility easements or municipal utility easements. And I would assume in all those cases, it's because I have denied an application. I'm never going to grant one of those and someone's going to be unhappy with it. So if I denied a lot or parcel combination, someone's going to ask the council saying, please approve this lot or parcel combination. It's a little bit less than like, it's not quite the same level of like a subdivision where there might be more complex things. There is a risk that you're going to get my opinion as, here's my decision, and then me telling you, and here's why my decision was right. So
And we have,
it is a bit tough.
And if we have a feeling we need to get a second legal opinion, there's been times like when we had, when we got in a situation with some employee situation, we recognized we need to get a specialist in employment law, and so we hired an outside firm to help us with an employment law. Even though we had an attorney that was, that we had, we still went and got outside.
Well, and I hear, what I think I hear Rob saying is as a zoning administrator and different things, it's good to have or be able to say that the city council will be the appeal authority on these certain controversial things. So we basically have his back in a way. I mean, we want to be fair, of course, but I think that's helpful.
It is good for Doug to bring up that you're coming in and how's that?
Yeah, how's that work? Yeah.
Or you override my decision because maybe I was being a little bit harsher. And you say, but which is also fine. So that is a good consideration, though.
Okay.
So, okay. Any other changes to make to this whole process?
So I guess the question I have, and we're going to do the public hearing, but we've suggested a lot of different changes, small ones, big ones. I mean, I'm kind of really leaning to the city council being the land use authority for architectural review for commercials. And I think, did Councilman, did you agree to that?
Yes, I agree to that.
So
I'd
are we going to have you make all these kind of little changes and then bring it back to us, or do we have to do all this in the motion?
Up to you.
If
I mean,
you feel you're
there's
ready,
no
you can make
rush on this, so if you'd like to give direction,
Yeah, because
I'll
there's
bring
quite
this
a
back
few.
later.
I was thinking how I'd put it in a motion,
I just won't be at the next council meeting. It's my first anniversary, so I'm taking the week off. So I apologize for missing a council meeting.
What do you guys think? Do we want to try and put in certain things, or just give him direction and then they can come back and we can do a motion another night?
I have only jotted down five changes that I've heard,
Okay.
4 of which are text changes.
Okay.
Um,
You think we can do it, Doug?
I think that.
Does that include on the land use authority for the architecture?
Yeah, that the 4 just text changes are, instead of site plan, have commercial site plan. Instead of AADU, have attached ADU. Instead of extensions, have zoning extensions. And instead of appeal authority, have appeal body as the table heading and cascading into the code. And then the 5th one would be change the architectural review land use authority to the city council.
So I think the plan commission should be the recommending body there, and the city council of the land use authority.
Yeah.
I just, we have so little commercial left, probably it'd be nice to be involved.
I'm fine with that.
So
Should we open it up to public?
Yep. Now, at this time, we're going to now open this item up for public hearing. If anyone would like to come up and address the council on this item, we'd invite you to come up. Is there anyone who would like to come up and address the council?
There we go. I'm Elizabeth Rice. So I saw Kim looking at me like she didn't know what I was talking about. So let me clarify a little bit. You are my elected officials. And what I want is for these developers who keep coming back time and time and time again, I think that you just need to have a little something down there that says they reserve the right to refer this back to the city council when they keep making changes and they keep coming back. And I'm going to give Highland Mains as the example. They've been back at least 3 times, and I think Rob said more than that. So I don't like that, whoever that is, and Scott's right. We don't have much development left, but I don't want it to end up looking, I mean, I would love to see, you know, when we were presented with Highland Mains and how wonderful it looked, and all the money that they were going to spend, and all of that, and now what it's probably going to look like, whether you're laughing at me or not. So I just really think that you need to have that final say. That's all.
Thank you, Liz.
Hello, Wesley Warren, Highland resident. A couple things I've been, since last week's Planning Commission, thinking about this a little bit more. I brought this up last week, but wanted to reemphasize, I am also in favor architectural review, with the council being the land use authority and the Planning Commission staying as the recommending body. And I think part of that is I want to echo what Liz was saying. I think commercial in the city is kind of the exception to the makeup of the city. I mean, it's a bedroom community, right? So I think commercial as the exception should always come to the city council. And I'm very interested to hear about the different changes and developments in the commercial properties and developments in the city for the same reasons and the same ferocity as Liz is. I want to know. I want to know all these things. I think if there's anything we know about Highland City residents is that they want to know also. So I think it is important that it stays with the city council. A couple of just kind of higher level, maybe not as important for tonight things for Rob. I keep trying to check myself looking at this issue and looking at the table. Okay, I'm a resident, or okay, I'm just a commercial developer, and I'm looking at this. I keep asking myself, who is this table for? And would it be a good idea to even define who this is for? This is for the person who is looking to do this, or this. Not if you are looking to do this, or this. I know that it was mentioned the difference kind of between land use code, development code, and municipal code, and how municipal code handles these things, but this is specifically for these things. Even, part of that could be defining what each of these steps are. What is the reviewing body and what do they do? What is the recommending body and why is that important? And I guess just making it a little more, not confusing, but I know the point is to streamline it and to make it efficient. And but I think some of these things do need to be fleshed out a little bit for the normal resident or someone that's just dipping their toe into this kind of thing. I think that one other idea or thought I had in the table itself was giving some thought to how these land use applications or matters are categorized. I didn't know if there was a way to better categorize them, even visually, by, these are the residential things, these are the commercial things, these are the administrative actions, these are the legislative ones. It kind of just seems like it's just alphabetical order instead of maybe in some kind of categories. But other than that, my hat's off, Rob. Thanks, Council, Mayor.
Does anyone else like to come address the council? Okay, seeing none, we'll now close the public hearing and bring it back to council.
So I'm sorry, Kim, did you want to go first? Okay. I just wanted to echo some of these comments. I think Wes's ideas about putting this table in some subcategories to make it a little more clear would be good. And then I guess, Rob, the question I have, and this is referring back to Ms. Rice's comments, at what point in a development would you bring it back to the council if they keep changing the architecture? I mean, if they're changing minor things, probably not, but where would you cross the line and where it'd come back to the council?
Great question. So for M&G's development specifically, this is why they're a little bit unique, is there's a development agreement the council signed, and it says, that's where they gave those pretty pictures of like, here's our plaza and kind of the buildings and those things.
Right.
Those are actual exhibits to that agreement. And they're meant to say, these are the themes that we will use, and they have kind of like idea boards of like this kind of color palette and this material, but I can't look at the roof of it and say that is a specific, this type of shingle on the roof. It just is kind of a look. So as long as it's within that realm, it's still within the theme of it. Now, if they try to change it all to just be a square box that has, windows and everything is gray, I can say, okay, that's clear change from it. But if it's the same kind of material, but I shifted the siding a little bit over here on one side, I don't know how I could say, well, it still kind of looks like the theme that got approved by the council originally. So at some point, it's a judgment call. They walked through their final changes, and it was, we're shifting the roof line, a foot, a little bit to the south, and shrinking up this by 100 square feet. And I was like, okay. I mean, it still looks like it's the general same footprint of the building, same general configuration. They're shifting utilities a little bit, but it's kind of this, if I looked at the concept, the pretty picture they showed, and to the building, I'm like, yeah, that's in the same realm. It's kind of I don't have a good answer of when it crosses the line, other than I could still say, yep, those line up as just looking at it. It's the terrible Supreme Court case of, I know it when I see it. I don't have a better answer for it, unfortunately.
So minor changes, no, but if they made some major changes.
Yeah. If they got rid of the plaza, or, just said, we're just going to make it a perfect, cross through the plaza. It's just sidewalk through, up and down. Like, oh, well, that's nothing like what you showed. You have a little park, you have a little, variation in landscaping. There's rocks, there's brick, there's pavers.
Playground.
But if they try to get rid of all of that, like, no, you can't do that. But if they change it from, well, we used our Southtown cobble here, but we're going to use, this type of paver. Like, well, that seems right.
But now let's assume they have an architectural look where the buildings looked at a certain, like you say, we thought this, but now it becomes more of a flat face, or they're going to do everything as a white building. Would that be a substantial change?
Yes, that would be a substantial change.
But if they went over it a lot,
it's a gray color and it has kind of a thing. It's like, okay, so they've shifted. It's not the exact gray color they showed in the picture, but we knew it wasn't going to be.
Yeah,
I don't have an issue with that.
And that's something I wouldn't want to have come back to council. I mean, if you have to continuously come back over things, it shows that we don't trust you as staff. And also, we have to be cognizant of our agenda.
And if we ignore MNG, which is a wildly different case than the land use authority table,
correct,
because we have that development agreement.
Correct.
It would be a much lower bar for bringing things back.
Yep.
Once we've approved a site plan that, like you said, if it's moving a drain 6 inches, that probably doesn't come back. That's a minor engineering thing.
It'd deter them from making good decisions. It would.
But if we approved a site plan and then it went from a 7,000 square foot building to a 6,000 square foot building, in the normal course of events, that's something that would come back for a site plan review.
Correct. So, for example, I'll use the hopefully future office building across the street from us over here. That's the Highland Groves, the attorney's office that's supposed to go in over there.
Yes.
So they have a building, with kind of a facade and a shared parking with the city and a parking lot behind it. So they looked at that and said, we want to cut a story off the building because we can't afford it. And so we're just going to kind of lower it down, approve that. But in no way does that look like what the council approved. Take that back to them on that. Or I guess that'd be planning commission in that case because it's town center. But if you make the council the land use authority, it would come back to council for that kind of change.
But here's my question. Who gets to make that decision? Is it staff that says, hey,
staff?
So we could have a staff. I'm saying, here we are 5 years down the road, different staffs there. If that staff person feels that that's not enough substantial change, then it just gets approved.
Yes. And in some ways, that's the way kind of all land use applications go, because, I mean, staff can give approvals on certain things, and they never told the council. The council never knew it went in until they drove past and wondered what that was.
We need to just have staff that we trust. Yep. I mean, it really boils down to that.
And we're lucky that we do.
No, you do. And
But as Reagan said, trust but verify.
And I hope we do 5 years from now.
Yeah.
I will have the same.
Doug, do you want to make the motion then because you have those talking points down?
Is there anything else that, I actually wanted to respond briefly to some of the comments that Wes had made, that I think they're very well taken comments, that the land use authority table, while I do believe it is a significant step forward in making our development code friendlier for residents, easier to understand for residents, I don't think that the code itself is going to quite get to the point where it really is super friendly, that perhaps some infographics that the city could put together that goes along with the development code may help a lot with some of what you're thinking about, and really identifying, okay, if I want to add a room onto my house, what's my process look like? If I want to put up a fence, what's my process look like? And if those are online along with the code, if those are available in the office, that may go a long way.
I think
toward really making that helpful.
We did at one point.
We have several help sheets out for building permits and fence permits and things of that nature, and we keep trying to update those as we have time. I mean, and if there is a better, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a graphic designer. I don't write things to be understood half the time. So if there's a better way of organizing the table or doing something, we can do that now, or that could be a future code amendment where we're just rearranging things. You know, I take no umbrage if you decide there's a better way this could look. I'm sure there is.
Give Brooklyn a shot at it.
So, council, we ready for a motion?
Can I just ask one question? That as I was reading through this, Rob, at what point, I was reading over the residential treatment center and the residential facility for the disabled. Those are two separate items, right?
Correct.
And on the treatment center, there's no time limit, like of how long you can stay there. I'm just looking for the differentiation between the two.
Off the top of my head, I haven't reviewed that code. I reviewed it recently and then it escaped me. I would have to double check what the time limits are on those.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I just was reading it. And can you remind me how much of that is up to us to decide how we want it to be? Like, for example, the for people who are unrelated. Was that something that we had decided, or was that something in state code?
So both. State law says you can't, it gives a minimum. So the big question is always, how do you define a family? And it's always, any number of related persons. The question is, how many unrelated persons count as a family? State law says your minimum is generally 4. So the city adopted an ordinance that says definition of family is 4 unrelated persons or any number of related persons. So that is what all dwelling units, so that's why we have the internal dwelling units. It matters because you can have a family in one and a family in the other one. And so for these residential treatment facilities where they have unrelated persons living together, they are limited by one family, meaning 4 unrelated persons. So with the daycare facility that the council approved recently, that was administrative because they just asked to be approved according to that code. A little while ago, we had a different one that asked for an accommodation that said, because of disability reasons, you need to ignore your normal 4-person limit and go to 8 or 12 or 16 or whatever it is. In that realm, it's out of the kind of that normal administration of just processing it. It becomes a request for an accommodation that the council still approves and reviews, or I said reviews and decides what to do on based on some federal standards on that.
And whatever number we define that to be as the family, the definition of that would be the same definition that we would need to use for like ADUs or any of that, right? They have to be the same metric or no?
No, you can grant an accommodation based on disability. So like for a treatment facility, they often ask, we want to have 8 people or 12 patients in our facility. Grant us an accommodation because in order to treat these disabilities, they work better when you have more people living together. So you grant an accommodation under federal law to your code. That doesn't change the standard of what a family is everywhere else in the city. It's still 4 people, unrelated people living together.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the City Council approve and adopt the proposed amendments to the Highland Development Code related to the creation of a land use authority table with the following 5 amendments. 1, changing the land use application or matter text accessory dwelling unit to be attached accessory dwelling unit. 2, change the land use application or matter text from site plan to commercial site plan. 3, change the land use application or matter text under planned developments from extensions to zoning extensions. 4, change the architectural review line so that the Planning Commission is the recommending body, the City Council is the land use authority, and the appeal authority is the appeal authority. And 5, change the header in the table from 4 appeal authority to 4 appeal body and reflect that change in references to the table in the code.
I'll second it.
Yeah, motion by Doug, second by Scott. Further discussion?
I'd like to make an amendment to the one with the attached to change it to internal. Because attached to me doesn't really sound like the basement, where internal is internal. If it's the basement or an addition, it's still internal.
So we do have in our definition, so I don't have any problem with that, but sometimes we just put an accessory unit is just attached to the building, right? Isn't that
We have
defined?
ADU, so we would say internal ADU.
Internal ADU.
How does that work legally?
Sorry, let me just double check the language state law uses for those. That's why, let's see.
Yeah.
Land use regulations. State law actually uses internal accessory dwelling units.
Well then.
I will second the motion.
Okay, so we have amendment. Now, let me ask you, can we just have them amend the motion, or do we have to now, because we've already had a first and a second, we have to amend?
Just vote in favor of the amendment and then vote on the motion.
Right.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend.
Second.
Well, no, I think we had Doug already second.
Oh, you did second?
Yes.
Okay. So we have Ron that made the motion. We have Doug that seconded. So now we are going to be voting on the amendment. The amendment is going to be the name of, exactly again?
Changing the
Attached to internal.
accessory dwelling unit to internal accessory dwelling unit.
Internal
Maybe just do that by a voice vote.
Okay, we'll start down here with you, Ron.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Okay, that amendment has now passed. Now we are going to vote on the original motion that was made by Doug and I believe seconded by Scott.
Correct.
Okay, now this is what's before you to vote on electronically. Stephanie, were you clear?
And that includes the amendment, right?
Yes. Yeah, we've already approved, yeah. Ron, you're able to log in or not?
Yes.
Okay. So that passes 5-0. Okay. We'll now go up. We're now moving on to the next item is number 4B, which is the development agreement with the Howdens at 6000 West, sidewalk and fence, which we had as a discussion item last council meeting.
Correct. So I will be relatively brief on this and my remaining items. They're pretty straightforward. Just go to the next slide. So this is 6000 West. The Howdens want to put a sidewalk and fence along there, as we discussed. This is their personal property to connect the sidewalk on the north, which is adjacent to the curb, to the sidewalk on the south, which is William Views to our current standards. On the next slide, there's the examples. Left is north. That's the older subdivision sidewalk, 4 feet adjacent to curb, no park strip. The middle is what their land currently looks like. It falls off a hill kind of right behind that, so there's not much room there. And then it becomes Williams View beyond that. And on the next slide is what they are proposing to put in. And the red is kind of highlighting the changes from our code. Because this does require some exceptions, it has to be approved legislatively through a development agreement. General terms are they are allowed to build this, but if and when their property gets developed in the future, subdivided, redeveloped into something else, whoever develops the property at the time has to tear out this and reinstall the sidewalk, fence, and a park strip to city standards, which would mean actually having a park strip, a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and then the fence set back appropriately. And that development agreement gets recorded against his property so that whoever decides to build in the future is on notice of what the city will require.
And Chris is willing to sign a development agreement.
Maybe. He was tossing it back and forth. He's not sure. His wife seemed to be more in favor than he was. He was still deciding. I haven't heard a final decision on him. The Planning Commission heard this last week. They held a public hearing. Chris spoke regarding this. Planning Commission unanimously, 6-0, because Chris stepped down from the Planning Commission seat, to support and recommend approval of this development agreement.
Now, we don't have this down as a public hearing item,
You do not need to have it because it's not a code amendment.
even though if it's a development agreement?
We only have a public hearing on code amendments because our code tells us to. Under state law, we don't have to do it. So you could hold a public hearing if you'd like. It's just not a requirement.
So let me ask you, Council, is there questions you have on this? I know we discussed it briefly at the last council meeting. Any other questions you have on this development agreement with the Howdens? Okay, then let's have a motion.
Okay, skip to the motion.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Okay.
I move that the Highland City Council approve the proposed development agreement with the Howdens for a sidewalk and a fence along 6,000 West.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Scott, second by Kim. If there's no further discussion, we'll go to vote. Okay, we'll wait.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. 5-0. Okay, we'll now go on to our expedited items. That will be number 5A, which is an action item for the Chad Christopherson donation agreement. And I happen to have a very nice check that has come from the Highland Foundation with that, as well as the agreement the city has received from the Christophersons.
So the major change was the council approved kind of a template for this. They had concerns because the naming rights were going to last for what we call the useful life of the facilities. So after 20, 30, 40 years, whenever a pavilion became old and got demolished, the city could rebuild it and didn't have to continue. The city could continue naming rights, just didn't have to, or could ask for more donations and put new naming rights out there. With the baseball field, the Christophersons were just concerned of useful life is a little more ambiguous with a field that gets kind of refreshed more frequently. So staff just proposed a 30-year term to alleviate their concerns. They have been alleviated because they've actually signed an agreement that had that proposed term in it, and they've given us the check. Their name that they are proposing is the Grant Cooper Field for the baseball field. So that was the only change, was that 30-year tweak to it. They signed even though we didn't have kind of the final council approval because they were ready to move forward. So that's happy to answer any questions on this.
Grant Cooper, is that the name of their sons, or what is the name from?
We believe that, I know one's named Grant. I believe they might have another son, Cooper. That's the name that they're proposing.
Cool.
That's two sons.
Grant Cooper Field.
Grant Cooper.
Yeah, where did the name come from?
We believe they have one son, Grant. I'm not sure, they might have another son, Cooper.
I like it. Grant Cooper, it sounds like.
Yeah, sounds cool.
With this grant agreement, is he specified an amount of time that he wants to have reservation rights?
No. He is just donating $250,000 for the field. There is no reservation rights associated with, just a naming right.
And they read it and they recommended some changes, so they're familiar with it.
That's amazing.
I distributed some proposed amendments to this, if the donor has already signed the agreement and the agreement that they signed includes Grant Cooper Field, then I am okay with not moving forward with those amendments and just going with what they've already signed.
And they have signed, we have the signed document. The mayor has not signed that document. We have to have that approval from here.
It does say Grant Cooper Field, though, on it.
I love it.
I'd just like to make a quick comment. I am very grateful to the family, and I'm very grateful for all the work that the staff and especially Councilwoman Rodella did to negotiate this. I think it's a very generous gift to the city, and that should be acknowledged.
No, we do want to acknowledge, I know when we kind of did some groundbreaking, they were there. By the way, the Christoffersons not only just help us here, but at Mitchell Hollow Park, they're really the ones behind getting that field put together. So they have shown an investment here in the Highland. This, the donation is $250,000. I think that's going to be in the agreement, which is a very generous donation. And so we appreciate them. And like I said, it helps us move the park further along and kind of help that baseball diamond. And the only thing I can say on that 30 years is we all recognize the baseball diamond does get reworked differently than a pavilion or a playground. And I think it was correct for them to have that request. So with that, I think we're ready for a motion.
Make a motion. I move that the City Council approve the special recognition and naming agreement for the Christoffersons with a minimum period for the naming rights to continue of 30 years.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kim, second by Scott. Let's go ahead and go to vote. Ron, you're still not able to get it. Let's just wait a second for them.
Yes.
I'll vote. Okay,
Yes.
Ron, go ahead and vote. Yes. That passes 5-0. We've already done the fertilization, so we're going to go now to item number C.
Sorry, Jeff, this was your big moment, but
I just missed out.
You did. We already moved it up and got it done. Sorry, Jeff.
That was your chance to hear from someone other than me. So you're lost.
I have a discussion item, okay?
Okay, number 5C is the land purchase agreement with Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District.
A couple more. We have to get it next item. So this will interest Wes. Actually, go to the next slide. So this is a property purchase that the council has authorized me to make an offer on. That offer has been accepted by their agent. I've given them the revised contract with this. It is buying the property near the city hall, just across the way of there, across from the credit union, right next to property the city already owns where our trail currently dead ends. That property contains a city PI well and some irrigation ditches, Lehigh irrigation, but we sometimes use it to exchange water or to kind of flush our system out. And our intent is to use it continuing for PI purposes and to expand our park trail facilities through there, either a park or maybe a specialty park, skate park, dog park, up to the council to decide what to do with that. We've offered a $300,000 lump sum payment. We're proposing as staff to pull half of that from parks for the park side of it, half from PI to continue to maintain and access our well and facilities on there. So on the next slide, you can just see it is very heavily encumbered with ditches. That would be a concern for residents. It's a little bit less of a concern for us. We can make that work for us. You can see our trail kind of dead ends there. Ideally, we'd like to continue that and get a nice loop all the way through the city from Murdoch Canal to Murdoch Canal on either side of the city. So we're excited by this, and we're asking for the council to approve the contract.
can you tell me, I know it's in the packet, exactly how much acreage this is?
Great question.
Is it just right?
Little over, I want to say 1.17.
Yeah.
1.17. Okay, I knew it was over an acre.
Because it's 1.053.
I was thinking of a different property. Thank you.
The good thing is, as we look at purchasing this, is we've all found out this well site, even though we have an easement, this gets us now owning the well site, the property for the well.
Correct.
It would be a great place if there was a dog park, skate park, a trail. Yeah, there's other things, and we own the property. This also kind of keeps this all in that city center area, so we're able to acquire this to keep close to city center.
Yeah, if you see right on the right side on the top, there's a little weird jog in the boundary line there, the blue line. When we got our PI well, there was a deed given to us, which is where that well was supposed to be located. that little area shows where the bottom of the deed's property location is. It's actually located in the middle of the road for some reason. The deed has a wrong legal description. So we built the well on the property. We had no deed for it because the deed was misaligned. So we have an easement by prescription, meaning we've just claimed it because we've had our well there forever. So it really will be nice to own. Or we acquired that well from someone else, but still, there's no ownership of the property. It'd be nice to actually own the property that our well sits on. So with that, happy to answer any questions, but otherwise, we have a motion.
Okay.
Hey, Mayor.
Yes.
This is a little bit unconventional, but I know that Wes had expressed interest in this last week and had questions about it, and we couldn't talk about it then. I would be interested if he has that same question or comment.
Well, Wes, what we're saying is before we do a vote, would you like to come up and ask a question of the council on this? If the council's okay, this is not a public hearing, but we'll let him go ahead. And Wes will.
Just because we had talked about it.
Yeah, thank you, Brittany. I messed up and thought that there would be a public hearing. I should have come up before. Wesley Warren, Highland City resident. Yeah, for a year or so, I've been kind of looking at different spots for maybe a dog park. And there's that orphaned part of the Town Center Meadows Park that is directly adjacent to the property being purchased. And that is, it's 1.2 acres.
It's another acre.
And perfect little dog park sized area. It's completely separate from the park. It has a little wooded area, which isn't very dense, which is perfect for dogs because they expend like 3 times more energy sniffing and rooting than they do even actually running and walking. It's right next to townhomes, both the old ones and the new ones. So lots of really good reasons why it'd be a good dog park. I'm not 100% sure about all of it. It might be too close to the highway. I don't know, but it would, yeah, and it would even be great to where he has the city trail being extended, shooting it up and putting in, I don't know the possibility of putting in a sidewalk there. It'd be nice to have a sidewalk there. But at the very least, having a dog park that was connected to the city trail would be another.
So do you have comments about our purchase here?
So the comments about the purchase is I support it. Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to bring up in council, or at least to council, was just the story of this whole area there, because I know the park ends right there. So this was great. It was pretty serendipitous, I guess. But I guess in addition to all the regular reasons with the irrigation ditch area and the PI well, and being able to own it, I think Highlands dogs are another reason why this could be a good reason.
So just to give a little history, we have been after this parcel for well over a year. We've done different offers trying to get working through some things here.
Were they playing hardball?
Or we were.
I like it. It's even better. But thank you for letting me stand up and say my piece.
Okay, thank you. With that, let's have a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the City Council approve the real estate purchase agreement with Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement, allowing for non-substantive changes to be worked through by the respective attorneys.
I'll second it. Oh, go ahead, Ron.
I'll second it.
Okay, so I have a motion by Doug, second by Ron. Okay, if there's further discussion, if there's none, we will move to vote.
Yes.
We just need to make sure everyone votes. Okay, it's 5-0. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is a reimbursement agreement. It's an interlocal agreement with Utah County on 6800 West, and this is also Rob Patterson.
Close enough. Ron's a great name too.
I'm sorry, Rob Patterson.
So a little while ago, the council, as you will recall, approved a fairly major 6800 West reconstruction and expansion project. Kind of towards the latter end of that, while Geneva Rock was still out doing work, and as part of kind of an overall city project, we in conjunction with Utah County and Lehigh City, who are also our partners on that project, wanted to do microsurfacing of 6800 West. So we asked Geneva to go out and do that. It wasn't part of the original MAG funded project. It was extra work that we're asking to be done to improve the longevity and quality of the road. Lehigh and Utah County agreed to reimburse us their proportional costs that they did for 6800 West. Lehigh will be cutting us a check for their portion. Utah County asked for a formal agreement to formalize their reimbursement. So I wrote a formal agreement for Utah County to formalize their reimbursement to us. I think the total cost coming back to us through this agreement, I think is on the next slide. We will receive $32,265.48 from Utah County. We've already expended this money, so this is money we're recouping from the county. And I was trying to have this approved administratively, but Utah County Attorney asked that this be approved through the legislative body, so I'm taking it to council.
I just have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Why would the council vote against this?
There is zero reason to, unless you don't like money.
Well, I feel like this should have been on consent.
I just
Should this
think
not
it's
have
an
been
interesting
consent?
thing.
Kim and I are wondering why it's not a consent item.
We just hadn't talked about it, or we haven't talked about it at
Enough.
least since the beginning of 2023, so we don't want to just have the council wondering what we're throwing on for a contract for consent.
Scared of us.
But we can move it fast like a consent
The
item.
last time we had an interlocal agreement that came up, I voted no on it because I didn't believe that state law allowed for our legislative body to approve it under the Interlocal Cooperation Act. I actually believe the same thing about this one. However, I'd like to thank Rob for adding the first recital into the resolution because I do believe we have the authority under Utah Code 10.1.202, and that's why I will be voting in favor of it.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that City Council adopt the resolution approving the 6800 West microsurfacing interlocal agreement with Utah County.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kim, second by Scott. Let's go ahead and go to vote. Ron?
Yes.
This passes. That was a 5-0. Okay, we'll now move on to our next item, which is the item number 6A, which is a purchase of flock cameras. This is supposed to be Chief Williams. Is he online? Okay.
He's on Zoom, and then I'll pinch hit as well. So he and I worked on this staff report together in conjunction. So just because it's hard to participate via Zoom, I'll take the first lead and then let you guys ask questions of myself or Chief, depending on the question. So really, we're bringing this item back, Council. Last we talked about it. It seems like Council was amenable to adding flock cameras. The discussion is just where do you want to put them at this point? Can you move ahead for me, Brooklyn? So as a reminder, we just kind of would strategically put these around the city, and you have to. I want everyone to understand that if we choose to move forward, you can't just use the cameras for anything. They're just to capture license plates, and you can only access that data if a law enforcement officer has a legitimate reason to do so. Alpine City and other cities already have these, and actually our police department has used them in solving crimes. If you do want to move forward with these, there's a cost associated with it. And if we're on a UDOT road, there's also some permitting that has to happen as well. So it'll take some time before we even move forward there. As far as the financial impact, every camera will cost the city $3,000 per year for the equipment fees. And then there's a small installation fee that'll go along with every camera. And then ultimately, there's also some software fees that Lone Peak Police pays for as a part of their budget. At this point, we have net revenue in the general funds, in the general fund for the city for this fiscal year, so we could afford to do this if council wanted to move forward. So I've got a list, these were in the staff report, a list of the areas that Chief William and I have come up with as the priority locations. And then if you move forward one more, I'll just show them to you on a list. This is the same map you saw in the staff report, except I tried to add some numbering so that it was easier to spot the different areas. And then also the little yellow dots are where they are located in Alpine, which it benefits us as well, honestly, just because it enters into our city. So Chief William and I are recommending doing 1 through 5 as the top priorities. And then if you wanted to add 6 and 7, you could as well, or we'd be happy to discuss other locations with you. And I'm happy to kind of highlight, this is the perfect time to draw on this, I think, right? To use our new fancy toy. So I'm happy to highlight those if you want to talk about specific locations or answer questions you have, Mayor and
Okay, so
Council.
number 1's at the mouth of the canyon.
Correct.
2 is down by the pond, coming in from Alpine Highway. 3 is on a Timpanogos Highway at 6400 West. Number 4 is coming out of Suncrest. Number 5 is off 6800 West and 9600 North. The 2 that we have not approved is number 6, which is Canal Boulevard and 4800. And number 7 would be 9600 coming out of American Fork from the rec center.
And none of these have been approved. It's just these are the strategic locations, and staff would recommend doing up through 5. If you wanted to do additional 1, 6, and 7 are also good ideas. But
Aaron,
we felt
can I-
like those were the highest priorities.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Why, on number 2, why wouldn't you move it up to Canal Boulevard? There's so much traffic that comes off Canal Boulevard, much more than comes off 9600.
Chief William, I'll let you jump in, but I know that it actually doesn't every way. My understanding is if you want to get a camera to cover multiple ways, you have to get multiple cameras, right? So these cameras are only designed to capture
One way.
one way. So it's all of the traffic coming into the city necessarily. So we could move it up to Canal, and I guess you would get anybody who is
You would have people
turning
coming
right.
off of Canal Boulevard turning right, which there's a lot.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, I think it'd be
But
a
I
little more
think then
efficacious.
you would also get where we're at with number 2 already.
Right.
Chief William, do you have any other thoughts on that one? Oh, wait.
So the chief has told me that he can only hear through YouTube, not through Zoom, so there will probably be a delay.
Yeah, there's about 15 seconds.
Kurt and I are having fun because I asked if he could put a camera right outside my house because it's a trouble area. We've had lots of
We gotta look at
calls.
some troubled areas. Chief, we know there's a delay.
And I think that's something he and I can work through. Ultimately, I can just ask him, does it make sense to just bump that up a little bit to that location?
Yeah, it seems like you'd cover more traffic. I don't know.
Right.
To me, and I'm going to put X's, this would be one I think you'd want to consider as number 6. That's Canal Boulevard and 4800. And you'd capture a lot more in that whole area by the high school. I don't know if that would be a one to really kind of consider as an additional. The other area we're not getting a lot of views would be up in our north area. I mean, I know we're coming out of Suncrest. Do we need anything on Highland Boulevard? We have them coming down. I take it's coming down from the Suncrest. And maybe that's where the chief could give some suggestions where he sees.
Yeah, it's entering into the city, right? So if you're coming down, that's where you're going to enter into the city ultimately. So we felt like that made the most sense.
Yeah, I err on the side of trusting the judgment of Chief William.
Me too.
100%, because I look at Canal Boulevard's already covered with 6. If we go with 6,
Yeah.
If we go with 6, there's no reason to move 2 up. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be making these decisions. I want our chief to say these are the areas that I strategically believe would be the most efficient and effective for the purpose for these flock cameras, and that we would support that.
I agree with Ron. I trust Chief.
And we always can start and add.
Absolutely. So do I understand? Do I understand council's thinking do 1 through 6 and then talk about Chief and I will discuss whether it makes sense to leave 2 where it is or to bump it up to Canal Boulevard intersection.
Yeah. I do feel like Canal and there at 4800, that would be a vital area. And I guess it depends. The chief would have to decide which way that faces. I don't know if you want it going up 40 or coming down where it's. Oh. Okay, so in our packet, the recommendation was to approve 1 through 5. And I believe now if we add 6, that would need to be part of that motion on that.
Well, this one's a discussion item, so next time, really, at this point, I think we can move ahead. You'll see this as a budget adjustment ultimately for approximately $20,000, right? Between the $18,000 for the cameras and then the minor installation fees that we have. So
I think as a resident, I understand there's concerns that you're capturing license plates and things that way, but what we've noticed of how, now it's not capturing faces, it's capturing, so here's what I've noticed, and I think we brought this up before. I have cameras in the front of my house, and I've had some neighbors have had their car breaking into, and they always get a hold of me and say, hey, can you give me the license number of that car? I go, I can tell you the style of car that it was, I can't give you the license number. But these will give you, if we know the style, they can type that in the flock camera and kind of almost come back what license plates come through. So I'm going, those cameras that ring doorbells or that can give style of cars and colors and if there's damage.
The key to this is always in how they are going to be used and the limitations placed on how they're used. Yeah. If we could get 50 of them, I would be fine with that. It's how are they being used? Right. And from what I've heard, everything that I've heard, it's just precisely what limitations we would want.
So now since we went to the land use, Rob, one question I'd have, is there an appeal authority if someone believes that they had a misuse of flock cameras used on them?
No, not directly.
You understand what I'm asking? Is there some?
If someone claimed like there was, like their privacy was invaded or something, they're bringing a constitutional type claim, civil rights or invasion of privacy, something of that nature, which is, it's.
I'm sure that the police department, honestly, they have to have a policy set up for use of these and they have to log like anytime anybody accesses the system. So it would go through like an internal process that way to see if it was misused.
I mean, because I can see something, hey, I want to see if my kids had someone come to the house at a certain time, or if this kid is I understand. That's what we don't want the use to be done. So, okay.
And Aaron, my recollection is that it is not that they are required to log anytime they use it, but that the system logs when it's accessed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me rephrase that. Yes, the system, because of the login credentials required.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Took long enough.
Great discussion. I think there's been some valid points brought up about maybe relooking at some of those locations and not necessarily adjusting them completely, but maybe moving them one direction or another. We can certainly discuss that. To answer a couple of questions that I've heard, there are each time that this system's queried, it's queried within the software and is logged, but we also have to have a case number, and the officers are logging each time that they're querying the system. So, and again, as the mayor mentioned, this does not capture any faces. It's not used for traffic enforcement. This is strictly objectionable data, not objectionable. It's data that's used by the police department, and it's not. It's nothing that, and it's capturing rear license plates, and that's all we're capturing. Not capturing faces. We're not capturing any traffic violations, but just license plates on vehicles.
Thank you. Hope you feel better, Chief.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, with that, we'll bring that back at the next meeting. We'll now move on to 7A, which is political activity. Is that going to be?
So honestly, Rob and I will tag team this. We don't really have anything prepared. We just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to ask us any questions you wanted to in relation to this. If you remember, we did a training last time about PAPIA, the political, I can't remember the words, essentially how governments can get involved or how they shouldn't get involved, right, in political activities with the ongoing election. So we really just wanted to provide an opportunity, a formal opportunity for you guys to ask us any questions if anything has come up that you're wondering about is, can the city do it this way, or can I personally do this or not do this kind of a thing. So that's really it.
We may want to look at this again as we get closer to the election.
Yes, so it's on, we have this agenda and next agenda, and then we won't have one until after the election, interestingly
So the ballots
enough.
will be hitting on the 15th, which is our next city council meeting. So we'll want to have any questions at that time. That's why I understand ballots are hitting on the 15th.
Right.
Or that's when they have to, I guess they have to be trying to be 3 weeks before the election. Is that, Stephanie, are we
That's
understanding that correct?
It is 21 days before the election. They start mailing those out.
Do you know the exact date?
Oh,
No,
no, I don't.
that-
Off the
that's
top of my
not
head.
okay.
There's a lot of political activity out there, and get ready. I'm sure in the next couple of weeks, we'll just kind of heat up on that. And just make sure-
Aaron, do any cities in Utah give staff election day off?
I have never heard of that. It's never been a query I've talked to other cities.
Everybody on the East Coast does that, so I just was
interesting.
interested. Yeah, and they all take Monday too, because why not?
The Monday after Election Day?
The Monday before Election Day. 'cause
Oh,
Election
okay,
Day's
Monday
on
and Tuesday.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that it's like a thing other places.
Okay.
Interesting. That is going to be October 15th when they do come out. So you were right.
Okay, we'll now move on to cell tower lease.
I actually have a couple of slides on this. So this is the Verizon tower.
Real quickly, before we start on this, Mr. Mayor, anticipating that this is going to take us longer than 2.5 minutes, I move to extend the meeting to 10:15.
We have a motion to extend to 10. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We're extended to 10:15.
Great. I'll keep this short. This is the potential Verizon tower that we talked about, Mitchell Hollow Park. We've had some ongoing negotiations with the tower company, and they have a couple of questions. The first one was, could they get a variance on their site setback? This is city property, so on the next slide, they're asking for, property zoned R140. It's a little bit unclear how it really kind of works here. It's still city property and city park. Normal R140, you have a 30-foot setback from any street for any main building, and you have a 20-foot setback for any accessory building. There's nothing really specific about cell towers, so they were wondering, could they get a 10-foot setback from the curb? It's just there's not a ton of room on this kind of northern side above the trail there, so they're trying to fit in roughly a 25 by 50-foot site onto that area. So this is a 30 by 50, which kind of works. They'd have to do a decent amount of grading and filling to make it in there. Jeff and I and Jason, we walked the site, kind of measured out. We'd be comfortable with going to 14 feet, kind of our normal fence setback. That would give us room for a park strip and a sidewalk if we ever decide to do that, and keep the fence the normal distance back. So they've asked for 10. We'd be a little more comfortable saying 14 we'd be good with. That
14,
still gives them space there for that.
But 10 would actually take it further away from the trail.
Correct. And they'd move it, well, probably not actually. They just move it further east because where that tree is, it actually dips down a fair amount.
Yeah.
And they'd have to
Being a
fill
little
in.
further away from the trail is appealing to me. Do we have any kind of standard or requirement or code dealing with how close these can be to a residential?
Yes, that's the primary setback we have for cell towers, and it's 160 feet.
And
this is well beyond. It's 200 feet plus away from any
And
residential.
we're confident that studies show that that's far enough distance. Because there's all kinds of studies going on, and there's some in Austria. I mean, it's scary in terms of what they think these things can do. Is 160 feet pretty standard in other cities?
I would have to. I haven't really researched. I know when the city adopted, it was a kind of a big fight way back in the day. The city went through and hired an expert to draft these ordinances. I mean, these ordinances are a few years old now.
Yeah.
But that's what they recommended at the time. There is federal law as well. These are regulated federally, so there's a limit to how much you can't entirely zone out cell towers from a city. You have to allow them somewhere in the city. Yeah. So I don't know. I can't give you a good answer on that, unfortunately. But it is more than 200 feet away from any specific property. So this was their thought. Is the council, sounds like you're comfortable with the 14 feet.
14.
I just wanted to highlight, we had another, as Public Works went out and saw, this is near our well there. You go a couple of slides ahead, Brooklyn. This is something new. I proposed it to them as a concept. They haven't responded. Don't know if they're open to it. They kind of previously asked if they could go into our well site. We said no. Public Works looked at it again and said, well, maybe if they essentially give us something more. The thought is we could give them where our storage is, give them, which would be more space. They'd get a 30 by 75, 80 foot area there. It's gravels and
Yeah, it's just gravels and road base for leaks in that area of town.
we'd relocate that more to the southern side. But in exchange, they would pave our site for us. This is just dirt. It's been leveled and fenced, but it'd be nice to have an asphalt actual entrance and site, help us get in and out of there easier, store materials easier. So our thought is, if we give them this, which is a nicer site, it's higher up, it's already leveled, and we'd relocate our materials. In exchange, they pave the site. I don't know if they're open to it, but I was going to see if the council was somewhat amenable to this idea as well.
I'm amenable.
Okay, Rob, I have some questions for you because my neighborhood is against this.
Okay.
Just to let you know.
Is this Kinkapoo?
No, just let Kim go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So I just want to gather information from this discussion to take back to them. And if there's any way I could get these like digital slide decks just to show them where it's going to go, what it's going to look like. I think some of their concerns are, blocking their views of the mountains, being an eyesore in our park. Okay, sorry. An email was sent out to everyone.
So here's one thing we need to, the first site was, I think it had, is it the topographical, does it kind of come down a little bit lower? This one's going to be more up. That's something I think the residents will need to know.
They're both higher sites. So
Okay.
the one site, it falls a bit, but there's also a little bit of a hill. Like the trail cuts down and it's higher on each side of the trail. They want to be on either side of that, essentially.
Okay.
It's roughly the same elevation. What they do is most likely raise the ground where it dips down to make their site level on the northern side. So they're not going to be lowering it. It'd be on the, they needed to be
I think a site plan also, as Ron brought up, where are the houses and how far away are these from? Give us the measurement. Say, okay, we have a house that's 220. Okay, if we look at where Kim's subdivision at, it's 500 feet. I mean, to give us a kind of a how far it is away. Some are saying, hey, this might affect my view, and I understand they don't want to look out their backyard and see a cell tower, but there's also power poles here. So relation to the, hey, the power pole is 60 feet, this is going to be 80. So in relation to that power pole, how does this look size-wise? Or is this 150 feet and the power pole is only 20, and so it towers?
Oh, certainly. We don't have a lot of those details. We're kind of in the preliminary negotiations. They're deciding if they're going to move forward. We're deciding if we're going to move forward. So we keep kind of getting a little bit closer. What I told them was, I want them to file a conditional use application, and then we'll start doing a notice. 'Cause I told them already that the council wants to get the input of the neighborhood before even allowing this. But I want them to file an application and pay a fee so we can send out notices and then hold a neighborhood meeting and get feedback. And then get a little more idea of what their site will be. So we kind of keep going a little bit closer every time of getting a little more definite. So we're not at approval. It's of, could either of these sites even work? Because they're saying, well, if we can't really get the setback, we can't do the site here, period. So we're not going to move ahead. But if the council is willing to look at this, we'll move forward with an application. You can start your neighborhood process and move on to there. What they're looking at generally is a 80-foot pole. They've talked about doing some of that stealth design. Sometimes, depends on your opinion. Some people like the tree look. Some people think it looks worse because it's a very clearly not a tree in the middle of a place that has no trees. So
They got to work on that.
those are things that are design consideration. Will come up more, but if you're looking at 80 feet tall for their tower, and this type of size of a site. So there's a ground station. If you walk near Myers, you can kind of see there's a little low building that houses some equipment. Then there's the big tower next to it. So that's the general design of it.
And as a council, we'll be taking a lot of things into consideration. I mean, one of the decisions we didn't do 5 years ago was put internet throughout. We didn't do the fiber with Utopia when they presented. Well, a lot of people are starting to go off cell towers for internet. So we have to also start looking, how does this affect? But I think we want to see what the view looks like and things that way too. But I'm just saying some of the things that affect us. Now, with that, my understanding is they have to bring fiber line down to this to be able to have it. So,
Interesting.
So, just a little question, Rob. So, if this becomes real controversial, which it may, what would keep Verizon from going down to Freedom Elementary, working out a deal with the school district and putting the cell tower there?
They potentially could, and that was actually
And then
their
the
first
school district
proposal.
would get the money, right?
Correct.
The school district gets to decide whether to allow it. They'd still have to meet our setback requirements and our code requirements, but other than that, if the property owner agrees to it, they can put it in there.
Okay.
So this was relocating it here as it's a little bit better beside the Freedom Elementary. They were looking at basically putting it right in the middle of their kind of outdoor asphalt area, which is kind of terrible from a site use. This is a little bit better in terms of location, and it's already quasi-utility on that north side of the park. Again, the council, and I'm just making clear, I'm not representing to the tower company that the council's 100% go on this. I'm saying, these are generally the kind of price terms we're looking at and contract terms and site areas, but we still need to talk to the neighborhood. We still need to work out final details. The council may put requirements on stealth and things. We're each just kind of inching closer to working on a deal. We're just still at high levels.
So coming back to Scott's question, if they went to the school district, what I think I heard, they don't have to come seek the city's approval to put it there other than meeting our setbacks. They could put it there as a government entity.
And take all the money.
They could take that. So I'm just saying, the residents could come fight us that's in that neighborhood, but also it doesn't move it to another neighborhood just a little bit further to the south. And they might say, hey, that's great, but those neighbors might not like the view because it takes their view just as much as the others. I'm just trying to.
Correct.
It depends.
I mean, it's the approval of the tower itself is an administrative decision. The legislative decision is whether to allow it on city property or not. So you have absolute control over whether to allow it in the park or not. But if they can find another site that can meet our administrative code requirements, they can put it there if the property owner
for
agrees.
instance, let's assume Ridgeview has this 4-acre parcel. They could go to not Ridgeview, that
Freedom Elementary.
the development that's going in on 6400 West. Fox. If they went and found a site in that was a property owner and they met all the setbacks, this is a permitted use inside that type of zone. Would that be correct?
Correct. It'd be pretty hard for them to do that with the residential setbacks they have to meet. But yes, if they could find the Bueller property that's not even in the city and the city has zero control over it, I don't know what the county regulations are. They could try to go there instead.
Hey, Kim, if it makes your neighborhood feel better, there were other stealth designs too. Like there was one that was like a water tower, which I know Cedar Hills is doing there by Harvey Park with like their city logo on it. So there are other options besides the non-tree looking tree.
Yeah, they just said they didn't like the tree because it looked like a, big oak tree that belonged back east.
Yeah,
and
if
was
you Google
clearly,
it, there's some like other cool ones.
I'd love to see like if we can find something that doesn't look like an eyesore. Others have approached me just about health issues and research on how it affects your health. I'd love to know, Scott, if you have any opinions on that as well.
There's a lot of controversy about that, but I don't think there's any really good definitive studies.
Okay.
There's a lot of yellow journalism and different things, a lot of people asking questions, but I'm not sure that there's much more damage than just having this bias all the time,
Yeah.
So I can look some research if you'd like.
That'd be great because there
Okay.
were a few people that said they show up when it does come up as an
I'd be
item.
happy to research that for you.
Okay.
Yeah, because that is an interesting question.
It is, like you bring up, Scott, the cell phone you put to your ear. We heard the microwave inside our house.
Right.
And that's objective, depending probably what we find studies. So, okay, this is just a discussion item that will be coming back later. If they make an application.
If they make an application.
If they don't, it won't be coming back.
If they don't, then this discussion's done.
Okay.
But it sounds like these are generally the two parameters the council's fine with.
I was thinking we should probably assign some more things to Rob.
Anyway, I think that's
Do you have
the
time
end of
to
our
sleep?
agenda. If there's nothing else that needs to be brought up. Now, we do want to wish Erin Wells the best. She might not be at our next council meeting that she is due on October 14th. So
Congratulations.
she might not be here on the 15th.
I'm due on our next city council meeting, so we will see. If I'm here, I might be a little grumpy. I'm not going to lie.
We keep talking about the 15th being our next council meeting.
Oh,
I
is
have
it the
the 8th.
14th?
I have the 8th penciled in as a potential council meeting that we had discussed some time
I think
ago.
we had talked
Did
about
we-
potentially doing a work session on sewer, but I think Fred couldn't do it then. It
Okay.
seems like so the 15th at 6:00 as a work session.
As you bring that up, let's look at our calendar. Next week, we do have Lone Peak Public Safety. At this time, there's not agenda items, so we'll need to watch to see if that comes up. Our next meeting then would be here on the 15th, which would be a city council. The trick or treat event will be on the 28th, Monday the 28th. We are anticipating having a council booth.
Oh my God.
I gotta go get my
Can I ask about the trick or treat? Are we going to use the rest of the candy we didn't use?
Yes, those boxes have been secured. They are here. If everyone's okay, we will bring back the claw. If you thought that was successful to have the claw, we could have the claw come back.
Sure. If some of us want to donate some others, would it be okay?
Say that one more time.
If we want to donate a little extra candy, will it
Yeah,
be okay?
and like right now, I've been looking, there's different candy on sale. We ought to get that. I think other than we need to get candy. I did see an email, by the way, we didn't announce did we tell who our new, Brenda, did we share that we have a new
Oh, no, I failed there. So our assistant city events coordinator, Brenda, what is her last? Armstrong, thank you, has been promoted. She is now our events coordinator. And so we're working on hiring an assistant to fill her spot. But, yeah.
So Brenda did send an email out to all the businesses in Highland yesterday. I actually received one because I have a business license in Highland, and she was inviting all the businesses to come participate. So she's that, and we do appreciate Robin. I know Robin is. I don't know if you know, she is building a home in Salem, and so there's her home. I don't know when it closes here in Highland, but we appreciated Robin and her efforts. She also did here in the community events. But any other date? Oh, here's your dates here.
And then another fun staff note: Chris Trusty, our new city engineer and public works director, starts on Monday. So we're excited to have him on board.
Okay, so we do not, so as we look at our council meetings, October 15th, we don't have our next city council until the 12th of November because the election is the first week. And so that's just, then if we look, then we only have one meeting in November and we have only one meeting in December. What we don't have on here is when our Christmas party is. We need
I was just thinking that, Mayor. I really need to make sure I get that set before I run off, probably. So we'll work on that.
Just so that you're all aware that
So
we
we
are
only
going to be
have 3
hosting
more
a vote
council
center
meetings
here.
this year.
For the rest of the year, we have 3 more council meetings. We're now counting down.
Does the county certify the results of the
Election.
Prop 11? Prop
Who
11.
certifies election?
Who certifies the election? Well, I think the county does.
So we will need to have, will that be that won't be our December 3rd. We'll need to have another council meeting to certify that, right?
I believe that the county is going to be the one that
Oh, you
does
said
the
county
canvas.
will be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll let
Sorry.
you know if I hear differently. But did you hear we will be having a vote center here at our city building on the 5th?
So on the 5th of November will be a voting center here.
Correct.
You can come
That's
cast
great.
your vote. If you have that, you can either come in and vote. If you have your ballot, you can come and have it scanned and cast that way. Is that right?
That is correct.
That's a.
So we can bring the ballot here and they'll stamp it.
You can.
So if you want to do it on the 5th, you can bring it in. They'll scan it, and that
We'll
way
have
you
a
can do it
ballot
per-
box out front too. Right?
Or our ballot box will start getting picked up after probably the 15th of October.
That is correct. So they'll open it shortly after the time when the ballots first go out, but it will be locked and closed at 8 p.m. on the 5th. So.
If there's nothing else, let's take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have Ron. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that we are adjourned.
Do we have an executive session?
No, there is no executive session.
And go home and see what happened to the debate.